Matt and Greg used to interview movie stars, but now they're doing a podcast.
How's it going, everybody? I'm Matt Levitz.
I'm Greg Trzebowski.
Welcome to another episode of Matt and Greg Used to Interview Movie Stars, episode 14.
Episode 14 is a pretty good one, Matt. Very good connection with the music stars.
Yep, we've got Evita and Poetic Justice. For Evita, which, by the way, took place December 12th, 1996, we're going to hear from Antonio Banderas, director Alan Parker, and pop star Madonna. And then Poetic Justice, which took place July 12th, 1993, director John Singleton, Regina King, and Tupac Shakur.
Very cool.
So we've got a lot to talk about here. I think we're going to skip junket talk this time.
Okay.
Instead, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the very long history of Evita.
Got it.
All right. So relax, pull up a chair. We could all be here a while. Evita was originally released in 1976 as a concept album by Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber. Back in those days, this was done a lot as sort of a proof of concept prior to staging a show. Rice and Webber actually premiered Jesus Christ Superstar the same way. And fun fact, Les Miserables and Chess were both started as concept albums. Anyway, 2 years later, in 1978, they staged Evita in London and then moved it to Broadway in 1980, where it was nominated for 11 Tony Awards and won 8, including Best Musical, Best Score, Best Book, Best Direction, and Best Performances from both Patti LuPone as Evita and Mandy Patinkin as Juan Perón. Now, this is very important. Remember both of those names, Patti LuPone and Mandy Patinkin, because they will never again be mentioned in association with a movie version of Evita.
Wow.
So turning Evita into a movie took nearly 20 years, and it had so many false starts, crashes and burns, and talent falling in and out that you would swear that Terry Gilliam was somehow involved with it.
That's another shot to the bow. Or bow.
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 In the late 70s, there was talk of Barbra Streisand playing Evita because she was dating John Peters, who at the time was going to co-produce the film. In 1981, Paramount acquired the rights with Robert Stigwood attached as producer, and they greenlit it with a budget of $15 million. They hired Ken Russell to direct because he had made the film version of The Who's Tommy, and apparently somebody high up at Paramount had completely lost their mind and enjoyed that movie.
Is that a factual response? Is that factual, Matt?
What other possible reason could there be? Several actresses screen tested for the lead, including Elaine Paige, who had originated the role in London. Ken Russell wanted to cast Liza Minnelli, but the studio didn't, so they fired him. Stigwood met with Herbert Ross about directing, but Ross turned it down and went and made Footloose instead. Then Stigwood met with Richard Attenborough, who said that the project was impossible. This was, of course, many years before Attenborough learned that life finds a way. Thought you'd catch that one.
Yes.
In 1986, 10 years before the film's release, Madonna went to Robert Stigwood's office to convince him to hire her for this movie, and she showed up dressed in a gown and a 1940s-style hairdo. So, to be clear, when Sean Young storms Tim Burton's office dressed as Catwoman, she's crazy, but when Madonna does it, she's resourceful.
Very good.
Madonna reportedly pushed pretty hard for Francis Ford Coppola to be the director.
Well, that would have been a good choice.
A year later, in 1987, the Weintraub Entertainment Group obtained the film rights from Paramount, and they promptly hired Oliver Stone to direct. He stayed attached for 7 years. In April of 1988, Stone traveled to Argentina. He visited Ava's birthplace, and he convinced the president, Carlos Menem, to provide 50,000 extras for free. Of course, Madonna still wanted the role, and she met with Stone in New York to discuss it, but Stone rejected her after she insisted on script approval and told him that she wanted to rewrite the score. So instead, Stone cast Meryl Streep, who started prepping for the part and even recorded demo versions of all the songs. They were all set to start filming in early 1989, but production halted due to the 1989 riots in Argentina. Since they could no longer shoot there, they started scouting locations in Brazil and Chile, but then the studio got cold feet and dropped the project. Stone took the film to Carolco Pictures, but Meryl Streep dropped out, and then Stone left to go make The Doors instead. In 1990, the project wound up at Disney. They hired Glenn Gordon Caron to direct. He's mostly a TV guy. If you know his name, it's probably because he created Moonlighting.
And he directed that awesome movie Wilder Napalm.
All right,
starring
then.
Deborah Winger and Arliss Howard.
Greg, I didn't say if you knew his name. I meant everyone out there.
Okay.
They don't know Wilder Napalm.
I took that personally.
All right, then. Madonna still wanted the part, so she was hired, but then the projected budget climbed to $30 million, and Jeffrey Katzenberg didn't want to spend that much, so the project was canceled. In 1993, the film moved to Synergy Pictures, and Oliver Stone returned as director. He cast Michelle Pfeiffer to star, but then she got pregnant and left, so he brought in Glenn Close.
My gosh.
At this point in the story, specifically May 1994, we did a junket for The Lion King, where we talked to Tim Rice, who also is Evita's lyricist. The subject of Evita came up, and here's what he had to say.
Are you involved at this point in the production of Evita, like the songs that will be part of the film?
Evita?
Yes. Have you heard any of the songs?
Sorry, have I heard any of the songs in Evita?
Yeah. No.
Oh.
Any rumblings for the Oliver Stone film version of Evita? Have you been consulted as to which songs will stay? Or?
Well, I sincerely hope they'll keep all the songs. There's nothing wrong with any of them, in my humble opinion, he said very arrogantly. No, I haven't been consulted very much at all. But I'm sure, Oliver is very quiet on the phone. I can't hear what he says. It's just a quiet voice. So I say, yeah, great. And I don't know what I'm saying, yeah, great, too. He might be saying, we're going to do it in ice, on ice, and we're going to cut out. But I would think we'll probably be able to, Andrew and I will probably be able to get involved with it nearer the time. But at the moment, we haven't started yet.
There's just one question that relates to that, and that is, this would be a musical with real actors. And we were talking about the stage, animated, but there has not been a successful musical on film.
It's not my fault.
What do you think it's going to take?
I don't know. It may be impossible. Who knows? But Evita might work because she was a person who was of the movie era. She used news film and very effectively, so it might work.
Any casting choices for Evita?
I'd like to see Madonna do it, but nobody agrees with me, or nobody who matters does. So.
It's kind of funny that Tim Rice was advocating for Madonna when Oliver Stone, who was still the director, didn't want her. Well, shortly after that, Stone left the project again, and Madonna came back in again. She's actually perfect casting for Evita thanks to her Patti LuPone level of Caucasianness, but she also brought just a little touch of star quality. Would Madonna win through? And the answer was yes. The truth is, she never left us, and she was surprisingly good for us. No one else can fill it like she can. So what happens now? Well, this is when Alan Parker was hired to direct. We actually talked to Oliver Stone in mid-1996 at the Nixon junket when Evita had just finished filming, and he told us why he stepped aside.
Oh, I didn't do that because neither of them really worked out. They're making Evita now for my screenplay, and Alan Parker is doing it with the same company that did Nixon. And it just didn't work out because of Menem, the president of Argentina, kind of was a double dealer type who said that we could shoot there in Argentina, and then 3 days later, under political pressure, nixed his decision. And unless we could do it in Argentina, we could not afford to reset it in Mexico. That was the reason.
It's an interesting excuse considering that the Alan Parker version did film in Argentina, but no matter. The important part is that the film finally did get made. Madonna got her dream role. Broadway fans who had been anticipating this for literally decades got their movie. Happy endings all around, except of course for Eva Perón, who is still dead.
That is not a really cool ending to your very epic narrative. So who do we start off first with Antonio Banderas, right?
Well, yeah, before we get to him, I do want to say that this Evita junket took place in the Ritz-Carlton in Marina del Rey, if you remember that room.
I do remember that room, yes.
And if you remember, Greg, instead of splitting us into two radio rooms, every time we were there, they would put all the radio junket people together into one room, and it wasn't a round table. It was a really long rectangular table.
Yes.
With the talent sitting at the head. So if you didn't get there early, you sat really far away, and it was much harder for you to get your questions in. But even the people in the front near the talent, they were typically further away from the microphones than they usually were, just because of the shape of the table. Now, this didn't happen too often, but it did happen sometimes. I do remember Speed 2 was another one, where we were in that same room in that long table.
Right.
And then in New York, I remember Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings was another one. We had a really long table, but it mostly didn't happen. We were mostly at round tables. But this one was a long one. And what it does to the sound quality is it makes it very hard to hear the questions because everybody is sitting so far away from the mics. I have done some work with these, playing with the EQ and doing some mixing, just trying to get the questions more audible.
Right.
But there's only so much I can do. So what I would recommend is if you have access to headphones, maybe you want to listen to these interviews with your headphones.
Cool.
Yeah, you'll hear the questions better. If you're in your car, and the sound is competing with engine noise and road noise, you're less likely to hear the questions.
Yeah, you can guess the questions.
But having said all that, the answers, I think, they're easy enough to follow even if you can't hear the questions.
Right. Our first up with these Evita interviews is Antonio Banderas. Basically, he first got his start as a foreign film actor,
right?
Working with Pedro Almodovar. He's best known for the 1988 film Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. My introduction to Banderas came with the 1989 release, Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down. I remember watching that actually at UCLA in college during one of the screenings, and I thought to myself, who the heck is this guy? This guy is going to be a big Spanish actor. I was wrong because he actually ventured stateside. In 92, he starred in the Mambo Kings.
Yes, that was his. That was where most people started to first notice him. I think that and Philadelphia.
Right? As Miguel Alvarez in the 1993 film Philadelphia, and then also that same year he starred in the House of the Spirits. So by then, by the time we got Antonio Banderas in the 90s,
I remember he was learning English.
Right.
His first few movies, I think he did his English language parts phonetically because he didn't quite speak it.
Right.
So he had someone on set kind of helping him with his pronunciation, and he didn't always know what it was he was saying. But now, of course, he speaks English perfectly. But in those early films.
Yeah, Interview with a Vampire. We had Kirsten Dunst on before. So he was in Interview with a Vampire in 1994. What's interesting with this Evita interview with Banderas is he alludes to, honestly, a time in his life where he felt the last couple of years before Evita, he overworked himself. And looking back on his IMDb page, the years were 94 and 95. Can you imagine? In 94 and 95, he starred in Of Love and Shadows, Interview with a Vampire, Miami Rhapsody, Desperado, Four Rooms, Assassins, Never Talk to Strangers, and Too Much. That's 8 credits in 2 years before we even get to the epic of Evita. So by the time we got Antonio for the interviews, he was obviously, he doesn't sound exhausted during the interviews, but he was definitely exhausted. And it's great to hear him be honest and say, you know what, I'm just going to take a little bit of a breather after Evita. And it's interesting because after Evita, he did The Mask of Zorro 2 years later. So,
well, I was also going to say that in the middle of the Evita shoot, he got married.
Oh, yeah.
To Melanie Griffith.
Yeah. So a lot of life happened to Banderas.
Yeah. And he talks about that. And as a postscript to that, actually, they stayed married for 18 years, which is a very good run, especially for a Hollywood couple. They did divorce in 2014. Okay. I guess if we're talking credits, we should probably mention the Shrek series where he played Puss in Boots.
The Zorro films.
Puss in Boots was kind of a riff on his Zorro character.
Right.
That was why he was cast. He was kind of doing a variation of that. Anyways, I don't have any more about Antonio Banderas, so unless you do.
And it means nothing, but Brian De Palma is my favorite director, so shout out to Antonio Banderas for his role as a photographer in Femme Fatale. That's another really interesting film that no one has seen except me. But a little Wilder Napalm reference. That's another movie that you should see is Wilder Napalm. I'm sorry for that interjection during your long epic story of Evita.
You are going down this rabbit hole, aren't you, Greg?
A lot of rabbit holes, but before I go down any other further rabbit hole, here is Antonio Banderas from Evita.
I would like to think that it didn't arrive yet. But no, it's not true. It's not true because as an actor, sometimes I have to fight with myself just to don't be so much thinking on the results and be thinking more on the process. And the process was gorgeous. And we got beautiful moments there. Very scary also sometimes. Because in a way, for an actor like me, I love to go to the set and improvise and change lines and just have conversation with the other actors and with the director and not going through the rules all the time. I felt a little bit claustrophobic. The fact that we have to record the album first and after to be tied to that all the time is just like building a house from the roof. and it was scaring me a little bit at the beginning. And the thing is that Alan Parker was directing us as actors more by the time that we were recording the album in London than by the time that we were shooting actually on the set. That he was more with the masses and, you know, the big deal that he had to handle with. It was huge and a big thing, you know. And but after it was working on the right track. I mean, but at the beginning it scares me. Basically because I knew that we were not going to do a rock and roll album record. This is an opera in which you have to establish an arc of behavior from beginning to the end in the story of the character, starting in A and finishing in Z, and that was very important to me, how dramatically I could do that without affecting, you know, the process and the movie itself. And so we were trying just to sing and put in the bag a very dramatic material to work with later on the set.
How easy was it to keep in character? In some numbers, whether they're dance or song, you're in God knows how many different costumes and how many different locations. How easy was it?
It was dizzy sometimes. This is a narrator, but this is not a normal narrator which who can just tell you the story as a chronic. This guy has an opinion, and he made choices, and he got a critical point of view on the figure of Eva Duarte, and cynical sometimes, and sometimes he's funny, sometimes he's upset. Basically, he's upset. But the key for me of this character is the fact that this man who is all the time just picky and pointy and putting the finger inside of the life of Eva Duarte feels an attraction, not so much for the woman, but for what she represents. And that creates a struggle inside himself. And probably that makes him more upset than the fact that he's talking about this person. You know, that contradiction, that dichotomy that he has inside. And that's the key question for me, that is resolved. It's not resolved in terms of that she's answering him to the question that she's throwing to her, specifically in that fantasy scene that we have in the movie, which is the dancing scene, the waltz scene, which is a question all the time. If you just read the lyrics, it's just one question behind the other. Why you did this, why you didn't do that, and she doesn't answer that. This movie is a movie that is that. It's a question without an answer, because it's a relationship between the power and the crowds. And that's going to be repeated forever in our days. It could be repeated here. You can take the story of Fidel Castro. You can take the story of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, or whoever. And you're going to find always the same question without an answer. And that's what this movie is about. It's about contradiction and about basically not about good or bad people. It's just about human beings. And that's what Eva Duarte was, and my point of view, basically.
Madonna is something of a legend herself, and probably has as many different images in a funny way as Eva Perón did, or Duarte. Did you have an expectation of what she'd be like, given her reputation, and did it change when you met her? Do you remember?
If someone would have told me, without me knowing her, 6 years ago, that Madonna was going to portray Eva Duarte, I would have said to myself, well, I don't know if this is going to work or not. But by the time that she was offered the part, I knew her, and I knew that she needed this movie as almost a therapy. And this is a subjective opinion. It's just an opinion, and she can just contradict me and completely. But this movie is kind of a diary for her. It's a way to tell things and feelings that she got probably in her life, that instead of going to a TV station or to a radio station and just throw those ideas, she just picked up a movie and picked up a character. And that character was Eva Duarte. They have some things alike. Some things, a bunch of them, maybe.
Do you have a movie yourself that you felt was kind of like a diary where you went through those kind of experiences, or you learned a lot from that project?
In my case?
Yes.
Not for me. Not for me, though I have certain experiences that I could use in the movie in my personal life. For example, the fact that I was doing theater from the time that I was 14 years old. When I started doing theater in Spain, we were living under a dictatorship. Franco was in the power, and basically we were doing theater against him, against his regime, political regime. And but I remember he was my enemy. He was our enemy. Everybody who was at the university at the time was studying in art dramatic school or whatever. When he died, I got chills, and I remember some tears just rolling down my face. And I couldn't understand at the time what was happening to me, why I did that. I am just betraying myself. It's just because with him was dying the story of my country, which was pushing us for 40 years. And it doesn't matter if the guy was good or bad. He damaged the country or not. What is dying is history, and it's a very special feeling. And I think in a way, Che in the movie feels in that way. That's why I kiss her at the end. In the movie, you know, I can be against her during the whole movie, and never she gave me an answer. She never looked at me. I'm a ghost. I don't have nobody to have an interaction with in the movie. I'm playing by myself, and I'm in an island. The only relationship that I have in the movie is with the camera. It's a toy. And the movie, for me, represents the audiences. And but when she died, that's what I feel. It doesn't matter what you were, but you were a story of my country, and I kiss you for that. And I go to the line, and I continue.
Madonna in the coffin there, was that
at the moment was Madonna. I remember they were shooting several shots of the same scene, and they were using a wax puppet toy. But at that time, it was Madonna herself.
It's more than 40, 50 years after the events that are depicted in the film. But when you were in Argentina and recreating something, did you get a sense that it's still alive for people there?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the only thing that you have to do is just to look at the walls and see the graffitis. The graffiti was very explicit about that. Now that you're asking me that, they were saying Evita is alive. That's it, and it were all over the city. But I shouldn't. I don't blame the people who, the people who were trying to use violence against us, of course, because I think that's incorrect. Any way you look at it. The people who were sometimes upset, they were right to be upset. The debate, anyway, on TV screens and every night almost, on the Argentinian television was Eva yes, Eva no, Eva saint, Eva evil, Madonna yes, Madonna no, Madonna go home, and all this stuff. It was at the beginning, but after the thing completely changed, and it became more freedom of speech, yes or no, which I thought it was much more interesting anyway for us, just to handle with something like that, more than with a political figure, because in a way, Argentina from the 30th went to democracies and dictatorships all the time, no changes. It finished with a horrible and brutal dictatorship in the 70s, in which 30,000 people disappear. No, they executed. They disappear. And now they have. They're trying to make solid the democracy that they have now. A country like that has to have the opportunity and tell the people from their governments to look back and to be capable to analyze their past. And if we brought that to the country, that's good. It's something that we could do. And I remember when we left Argentina, the situation with us was completely different by the time that we arrived there. Because that debate just made the people think a lot about what we were trying to do. We were artists trying to tell a story. We're storytellers. And the story is impossible to change. It was like that, and there's no way you can change it.
Fan of
Sorry.
Weber, Andrew Lloyd Webber, and Tim Rice, and also musical theater. What is it about that music that makes you such a big fan?
I don't know, but it caught me from the beginning. The first time that I saw Jesus Christ Superstar in 1973 in Spain, and we were still under the dictatorship, and the people was pretty angry. I remember when I went to see Jesus Christ Superstar because of the religious issue, there were people at the door of the theater praying with candles and throwing ink against the screen and stuff like that. It was pretty tough, and I found that so beautiful. And so, breaking the rules, and that I thought it was wonderful, Now, I mean, we have to think that it was 23 years ago, and things changed from that moment on. But I am an actor because of Andrew Lloyd Webber. That's the reality of it. And it seems that I am selling the movie, but it's the truth. And I bought the record of Evita in 1976. I was putting money together for a couple of weeks, and I remember even the name of the store, Ruiz Cueto. And
this movie was happening and tell him that he's leaving?
I met him. I never said that to him.
So what is it like for you now? Then, I mean, you just came off making this gigantic film, and it's not too long ago that to be where you are now must have seemed completely impossible. Do you ever catch yourself and just say, like, wow, how did I get here? Was this within a dream, or do you just keep...
Yes, in a way, yes. If I put myself in the position that I had 20 years ago, of course. I mean, it would have been not like a dream. It would have been both. It would have been a dream and a nightmare at the same time. But the thing is that, from my point of view, from outside, it could look in a different way. But from my point of view, I've done everything step by step. I'm like a little ant. I'm a worker of this profession. I never consider myself a star, and I think I will never do. I probably don't have the conditions to be a star. I consider myself a worker because when I came first here to America, I did the exception of the rule. I did a movie without speaking English at all, in Mambo Kings. But it was an exception. After I had to go to Philadelphia and do a little character, and to House of the Spirits, a little character, and after I went to Interview with a Vampire with a little bit more responsibility, Miami Rhapsody with a little bit more, and the next year more and more, the thing came, and I was very lucky. Basically, I've been lucky always in my life because of the human factor. I've met the right people at the right moment. And that's what makes my career. There are many people like me in the world, actors that they had been working very hard, doing theater in little villages, as I did many years ago, and they never had the opportunity that I had. So the point that I want to make with this is just the only one thing that can save me, which is not a justification, just the fact that I know that in the position that I have now, I have to work very hard. I don't want to get in 70 years, if I reach that age someday, and look back and said, I didn't put everything on the table. At least I want to do that. After, you can be more or less talented. But just to work as hard, as tough as you can to get at least that thing out of your mind. I did what I could.
You got married on this film, Antonio. I mean, Madonna got pregnant. you got married. Did it just seem like the right moment to do it, even though filming was still going on?
As we planned the ceremony, very little. It was not painful at all. I didn't even felt it, We didn't do a party, or we didn't call press or anything. We went to a little, went to a judge in Leicester, and so we're gonna get married. So, ping pong, that's it.
Can you talk a little bit about what you and Melanie give each other in your relationship? Why you seem?
I shouldn't say probably happiness, which is probably a breeze that touched your face once in a while, but knowing that we both have different stories, turbulent stories sometimes, I don't know, it's an encounter that make me feel good, make me feel a little the joy of life, and I feel great about it, and I know that, I'm gonna in a way confess some sins, I think, for example, in my professional life, I think I've made mistakes, but it's a learning process too. here in Hollywood for an actor like me, which I didn't have reference points just to come to America and build a career. In 1994, 1995, I worked too much, and I was completely overexposed. And at the same time, you have to add to this the fact that our relationship started, and they were out in the tabloids and the yellow press. And at the beginning, I think I was very ingenuous, and I started just talking. It's not the same talking with you guys, you're journalists, and talking with paparazzis. Sometimes you get confused, and I got confused, and I start telling stories, and they took these stories, and when I wanted to think about it, it was in the middle of a storm that was impossible to wait, but there was no point of return. All I had to do is just wait, sit down, swallow everything that was thrown against us, and wait for a better time. I reduced the number of movies that I had to do. I don't want to work so much for two reasons: the overexposition, at the same time because you cannot prepare the movies. You are not honest, really. I need the time that I spent to prepare Evita. I need the time that I am using now to prepare the new movie Zorro, and that's what I'm going to do. That's not going to happen never ever again. You know, it was a big hit in my mouth, but at least I think I learned from it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, too.
Thank you.
We are back from the Antonio Banderas interview. Matt, do you have any postscripts on Mr. Banderas?
Well, just that he was getting ready to play Zorro for the first time, which he talked about, and that movie, The Mask of Zorro, came out a year and a half later in 1998.
Very cool.
So that's all I got. Let's move on to Alan Parker, the director.
I have an interesting story. It's actually not that interesting, but today at my local Starbucks, I was drinking coffee, and I overheard someone said, "Man, I just saw Midnight Express the other day. What a film." And I was thinking to myself, Midnight Express. I never saw that film. I know it was critically acclaimed, starred Brad Davis. I wonder who directed that movie. And looking at the IMDb page, the director of Midnight Express is Alan Parker.
Who knew?
Alan Parker, who I'm sure you've seen a lot of Alan Parker's films, fellow listener. He directed Fame in 1980. I know you saw this, Matt. He directed Pink Floyd, The Wall. Are you a Pink Floyd fan?
I do enjoy a lot of Pink Floyd's music. I'm not the biggest fan of that movie.
Okay, fair enough. And he also...
But I acknowledge it was a big one.
When I was a kid, I used to love, you mentioned Jodie Foster. I used to love the Jodie Foster, I believe it was Scott Baio was in this movie from my recollection. Bugsy Malone in 1976. Kid Gangsters, that was interesting.
Yes.
He also, in 1984, he directed the Matthew Modine, Nick Cage film Birdie. One of my favorites in 1987, he did Angel Heart. I don't know if you saw that. Robert De Niro as the devil. And then in 1988, we've had Francis McDormand on the show. He directed Mississippi Burning. A lot of really cool films. 1990 was Come See the Paradise. He did The Commitments, The Road to Wellville. Not so well received, The Road to Wellville. But
yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that one.
Yeah, that came out in 94. 2 years later, he comes out with Evita, which he came at the tail end of Matt's epic story on Evita.
Well, he's the only one who actually got it made.
He actually did get it made. Do you have any comments on before we get to Alan Parker?
Well, I think the interview is pretty self-explanatory. The only context that I do need to set up, and you had mentioned this a little bit earlier, Greg, is that Andrew Lloyd Webber, who composed all of the music for Evita, and Tim Rice, who wrote all the lyrics, they don't really get along.
Right.
They've done great work together, particularly this, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat and Jesus Christ Superstar, but they don't collaborate much anymore, and whenever either one of them is asked about it, they just shrug and say that, quote, the partnership has run its course, and that they are, quote, no longer relevant as a team. Can you tell that they're British? Anyway, getting them back together to work on this film was a little bit thorny, and Parker does talk about that.
Very cool. So here we are, Alan Parker from Evita.
1979. I mean, tell us a little bit about your history with this Evita. You grew up with her, I understand.
Yeah. Well, when originally Tim and Andrew brought it out as a concept album before they did it as a show, and I had inquired even when the album came out whether they would think of making it as a film, but at that point the message came back that they wanted it on stage first, and then I saw it on stage in London, and I saw it on Broadway, and I was making Fame at the time, And that's when Robert Stigwood asked me first time whether I would like to make it as a film, and I said I'd give him the answer when I finished Fame. And I think it was really having, doing one musical and then doing another musical wasn't something that I felt like doing at the time. And so and also you're exhausted at the end of a movie, so kind of said no. So I sort of regretted it, and then I watched for all those years as all the other people were going to do it. So then it came full circle and it came back. But it was really, didn't want to do two musical films, one after the other.
How did it come back?
Andy Vanya and Robert Stigwood asked me exactly just over, actually not more than just over 2 years ago, whether I would like to do it, and I thought, yeah, I'll have a go.
Was Madonna already on the project at that point? Was Madonna already on the project?
No.
So was that your choice, or was her?
Yeah, it was the incumbent at the time, because the previous manifestation was actually Oliver Stone's version. The incumbent was Michelle Pfeiffer, but Michelle she had two small children, so she didn't want to travel, so that really didn't come into question. So it was, I had to start from scratch the moment I agreed to do the film, really. And I agreed to do it. I was in London Christmas 2 years ago, when and then Madonna heard that I was doing it, and that's when she wrote me this letter asking me, telling me that she was the only person who could play the part. And so I spoke to her on the phone, and then we met a couple of times when I got back to LA. Pardon?
How Evita of her.
How Evita of her. How Madonna of her. Yeah.
Well, it seems to me that Tim Rice was early on saying that he really wanted her for this role. Did that have an impact?
She was involved in other, manifestations of the film. A few years before, this movie. I think even with Oliver at one point, but the two of them didn't get on. So she had been involved. She knew about it, and she'd been mentioned as doing it. 4 or 5 years before I'd said yes.
Did she audition for it?
No, not at all, no.
Did you have any thoughts about her voice? I mean, because this is an opera.
It is, and it's very difficult to sing, yeah. I didn't ever want it to, the most important decision we made was that I didn't want it to be sort of theatrical divas waving their arms and belting their lungs out. I think it was going to be done in a totally naturalistic, realistic way, and also to make it more contemporary. So I knew the strength of her voice. I was actually kind of surprised that what happened was in between, us going with her and then her arriving in London for the rehearsals prior to the recording, because we did recording for 4 months before we started shooting. She worked really hard with a vocal coach and extended the entire range of her voice, and I was kind of little surprised, pleasantly surprised actually, how strong her voice had then become in order to be able to cope with what is in fact, as you say, a very difficult score.
Was this a logistical nightmare to put together? I mean, you in one song or one dance were in about 6 different locations, or maybe more.
It's a very big film. It's colossal film. The film, the musical film genre is actually probably the trickiest to do technically for a director. Not only that you have to make 2 films in one, in that I had to spend 4 months making decisions on the music before we actually started shooting it, and that's difficult. The fact that I had sort of insisted really to myself that I would shoot as much of it in Argentina as I would be allowed to. We arrived in Argentina and we saw all these big signs on the wall telling us to go home, which wasn't very nice. And then we just took it all on the chin, and then sort of things changed for us really for the better, and then ultimately won people around, and then the president gave us use of the Casa Rosada and the balcony in order to do Don't Cry For Me, which they'd been saying no to for years. No one had ever filmed in the Casa Rosada ever before, and
was Madonna responsible for that?
It was a lot of people actually were involved in actually trying to get them to say yes. So I'd been talking to them for like a year. I'd met the president 6 months before that, trying to get him to say yes. I'd spoken, as did all of the production people, to almost every single cabinet minister. It had been going on for a whole year. The British ambassador was helping, the American ambassador was helping. It was quite a concerted effort. And then, out of the blue, the president, as things started to look better for us, and they obviously started to accept us, the president wanted to meet Madonna. And she was obviously more persuasive than the rest of us put together. So, I think it was she was very helpful. There's no doubt about it. But she didn't do it on her own.
One of the most challenging scenes for Madonna, and possibly for you to direct, must have been the scene where she's dying and she's crying and singing. I was curious how that was done. Did she sing during that scene, or was that put in later? And how was it to get that performance from her, which was wonderful?
It was done live. I mean, the lament is a deathbed scene, and she did it live. I mean, she had an earpiece in order to keep in tune, and a pianist, electric piano actually, which is actually the sound you hear on the film, was following her as she did it. But it was all done live because you couldn't ever do that to playback. It would be impossible to match the crying and breaking down and singing.
What was more difficult, making peace between Madonna or the production in Argentina, or making peace between Weber and Rice?
I think Argentina was easy compared with Weber and Rice, actually. I don't know. They're a funny couple. You know, I don't think they really get on that well. They don't get on well at all. In fact, they don't like one another in any way. But they worked together very successfully on this originally, and it's an old piece. It's always hard to come back to an old work, you know. And there are a lot of things I wanted done. There's 140 changes that I wanted made to the score. Some small, some quite significant, and including a new song and whole new lyrics for another song. And a whole lot of new scored music, which is what the film has, which Andrew did. So getting the two of them together was going to be very difficult, but they did, and they seemingly got on all right. I mean, I can't say that they enjoyed it or that they will ever do it again, but it wasn't so horrendous.
It's a legendary riff, and I'm just wondering, who do you... Well, it is, and in songwriting circles, I mean, who did you go to? Did you go to Weber? Did you go to Rice? And who was the easiest to sway, and how did you...
Well, I had to obviously talk to both of them equally. I worked more in the end with Andrew because I had to, because he had more to do. He was involved with some of the recording, and he was also as I say, he'd had to do a considerable amount of new music, scored music that was going to be done after I'd finished filming. So I kind of worked more and therefore spent more time with Andrew than Tim. And in a way, for me, he was probably easier to deal with than Tim. I think Tim didn't really, enjoy the fact that he had to go and revisit reworking of lyrics that I required.
Do you really think that Madonna had the acting chops to actually pull off this role? Because she's pretty much an unproven actor to play compared to Meryl Streep or...
Yeah. Well, I think it's the judgment really is that it's an unusual genre. It's acting and singing, and I think I truly don't believe anybody could have done it as well as she's done it. So I mean, I've admired her for a long time. I knew her before I got involved with this, and I actually never had any problem or had any doubts that she would actually be able to pull it off. I think that. The only doubts I might have had was that the celebrity status, the icon, actually might get in the way, and people might not actually give her a chance to be thought of as an actress, or indeed as Eva Peron. That was the only difficulty, but she overcame that, and I think she did it extraordinarily well. And any of the other actresses that you might have mentioned probably wouldn't have sung it as well. So it's
But don't you think it takes an icon to play an icon?
Seems like it. Maybe that's why she does it so well.
What about Banderas? Is that story true that he had dinner with you at a restaurant and he got up and sang the score? I know it's true enough, but it's a great story.
He did sing a lot of different songs, and including songs that he's a big Andrew Lloyd Webber fan, believe it or not, and he was singing everything. I mean, in the restaurant. Although when he comes and talks to you, you probably can't remember doing that, but he did.
Tell me a bit about that, would you? You went to have dinner?
No, I'd agreed, I was meeting with him for the first time personally. I'd seen a videotape of an audition that he'd done many years before when he'd first arrived in the United States. And, I've always been a fan of the films that he'd done in Spain. And it was just, a relief really to hear that he could sing so well. So I went to see him in Florida, where he was making Assassin, I think was the film he was doing. And he was, he just kept breaking into song, actually, singing every song. Certainly knew off by heart already the Evita soundtrack, and he knew every Andrew Lloyd Webber soundtrack. Quite extraordinary, really, because it took me by surprise, and the rest of the restaurant.
Of course, people who know the original cast album from the play are going to miss certain songs, and you certainly didn't feel wedded to the stage version. What kind of changes did you make in terms of adding material, but also I understand that you were more concerned about historical accuracy than the play?
Well, it's there is 99% of the music in the play is actually in the film. There's nothing really missing. There's only one dodgy little piece in the middle, which is a musical chairs number, which was just done for the stage, which is the only thing that's not there. We have a whole. The most important musical changes really were made. I completely really reconstructed the final act, getting rid of a gigantic, piece of like 8 minutes of recitative, which was exposition, and that's what the new song replaces, and as does a great deal of Andrew's score music. That's around that section, Santa Evita, and then before that, I brought back from the White Album, which is the concept album, song "Lady's Got Potential," which did not exist in the stage piece, and that Tim completely rewrote those lyrics. So almost everything that's in the stage actually is in the film, but there's much more music in the film.
Can you talk about Madonna's pregnancy on the final stages film? How did you feel when you first? Do you remember how you first got the news?
Well, we did 5 weeks in Buenos Aires, and then we left to go to Budapest, where we had to begin filming in like 5 days' time. And I went directly to Budapest. Madonna went to New York, and she phoned me from New York, and it was total cliche situation. She said, "Are you sitting down?" And the moment she said that, I went, "Oh no!" And she said, "I'm pregnant." So all I could think of was actually real. I was very pleased for her, obviously, but it's I had to rearrange the schedule in my head, and I wasn't allowed to tell anybody because it was meant to be secret. She wasn't going to tell anybody. I think originally I think she was going to give birth and still deny it, but she did agree. Well, first of all, it was a secret, and I had to tell the production manager, assistant director, and line producer that I wanted to change the schedule, but I couldn't give them the reason. So they started to look at me like I'd completely lost my marbles, and so I said to her, "It's ridiculous. I've got to tell people because the schedule had to be rearranged in order to do more of the more energetic pieces earlier." For her, and but it worked out okay. I mean, I think if there'd have been a month, difference in the timing, I think it could have been pretty difficult. But as it happened, it didn't prove to be a problem.
Did her celebrity or icon status present any problems? Not with the fans trying to sneak in, but there's a lot of scenes when she's kissing extras and stuff like that. She's not your typical actress.
No.
She is an icon. Were there any interesting scenarios that came about from that?
No, I mean, quite frankly, the only difficult thing is the fact that you have you have paparazzi and people swarming all over you. Not to just mention the fans. Fans can be a bit irritating, but actually we got into a rhythm and a way of working where that didn't affect us. Bear in mind, the actual film unit itself is 280 people, so we're kind of a sort of self-contained little army of our own once she got there and on set. With regards to her contact with extras and things, not really, because they're told pretty clearly that you can't just keep going up and asking for autographs or whatever, and they wouldn't get them anyway. But I mean, they were mostly pretty disciplined actually in that regard. But they're told very clearly, and they're employed with a set of rules that they have to abide by, and if they don't, then they're not there next day.
What were the most difficult scenes to film?
Sorry?
What were the most difficult scenes to film?
Well, that comes into two categories, really, in so much as logistically, the gigantic scenes, which there are a number of very, very large scenes, the big funeral scenes, are very difficult for us as a production to put together. from a directorial point of view, it's pretty scary to make sure you've got that all right, because it doesn't obviously require a huge amount of preparation. But funny enough, it's the more intimate things ultimately that make your heart beat that are the most difficult things to do always, you know. Funny thing is about doing big scenes is that once you have that gigantic sort of toolkit, you know, say we were a huge travelling army really, and I have a huge support mechanism to be able to do that. But if you're doing, you know, simple scene, dramatic scene, there's very few people in the room when you do it, and funny enough, they're always the most difficult.
Were there any scenes where you and Madonna had a concept that were diametrically opposed, and if so, how were they resolved?
We didn't actually, no. I mean, she was very respectful, really, of the fact that, you know, it was my vision. She put an enormous amount of work into her research. She arrived in Buenos Aires a lot earlier than she needed to, because she went, you know, most of my knowledge of the piece is academic. You know, I read 29 books, whereas what she wanted to do is actually talk to people who knew Eva Perón, people who liked her, people who hated her. And she had a whole network of things going, and she put a lot of work into that in order to try and understand and get inside the head of the character that she was playing. And the broader view of things, of course, is the director's responsibility, and she never ever queried that at all. I don't know that her and I actually did have any, you know, argument about any single thing that was creative. Most of her, you know, complaints, if any of you have read the Vanity Fair pieces, because she was always moaning because it was too cold or too late or too hot, you know. But when it came to creative, the work, she was as good as gold. She was extraordinarily professional.
We asked Andy about the merchandising and the promotion and marketing of this film, seeing as it is an operetta. And he said, well, what with MTV and music videos and so on, I'm wondering if that's okay with you, that Evita and MTV and music videos are all in the same sentence.
No, I think it's slightly more complicated than that. I think that usually the question comes up, you know, is what's happened to the Hollywood musical, you know, as a genre. Obviously, it's been some years before anybody's done one, and maybe no one has ever attempted a film of this nature, of this size, which is actually sung through. Completely sung through. They get nervous if you use words like opera, but I mean, I think in the end, that's what it is, and I think that's obviously its great strength. The point about MTV is that you do have an entire audience, young audience, that has been brought up in 15 years of music television, which is to be communicated to with music and with images. That's the audience of today, and it's certainly going to be the audience of tomorrow. That's a very significant audience. Does that mean that what we've done is MTV? No, because MTV does not have any, in the norm, the actual structures and the narrative line are done with usually very, very little intelligence. But with regards to actually being communicated to with music and song, it's not so unusual. And in that regard, what we're doing is just stepping forward and going forward with a particular genre and to a place where it's not been before.
Do you think that the success of Evita will usher in a new age of Hollywood music?
Well, apparently, whenever you read these things and they say all the studios are looking forward to it being a success. This is really unusual because most studios want everybody else to fail. And the reason is because they all have musicals ready to go. All of them, whether it be, whether they make the stage musicals, the Lobeba pieces like Phantom of the Opera, or whether, they're going to do Cats as an animated film, apparently. Les Miserables is a film that has been in development for many years, which Sony have. So I think, should we succeed, yes, there will be a number of films, and some will be good and some will be bad, and when the bad ones are made, then you won't get another one for another 20 years.
What is your next project going to be?
Sleep. No.
After that,
Starring the music.
Yeah, no, you certainly deserve
Sleep, yes. Starring.
You deserve that. You did a masterful job, and when I sat there and looked at it, I thought, how did he ever get up, do this, get through this?
It's been a very hard one, I've never been really a director. A lot of directors, have 28 things they have, in the drawer ready to pull out. I've never been like that. I always feel that I have to finish the film first. This has been completely and utterly consuming. You've seen, you know, whether you like it or not, or whatever, it is a colossal endeavour and piece of work, and it's very, very difficult to do, and it could have only been done by me spending 2 years and 7 days a week on it. And in 2 years you change. So although you do get seduced by the fact that it's just wonderful to have this gigantic army and fantastic, all the resources one would like to make a movie, you kind of, I probably, as I normally do, would react against that in my next film and do something smaller. But you know, I truly don't know. I truly, all I have to do is, I have like 5 premieres before Christmas that I have to go to around the world, and that'll be it. And then then you just have to recharge your batteries, otherwise you go loony.
You've done over the years. You've done some great films, and some better known than others. But it's quite possible that this film is the one that you will be known for. Alan Parker, he did Evita. I'm just wondering, how do you feel about that? I mean, how do you personally feel with the product? If this is the one thing that everybody remembers you for years down the road, do you feel satisfied?
That'll be fine. Yeah, I mean, I think that you know, I work very hard on it, and I'm very proud of it. You're always most sensitive of all, when people ask you about your films, you're always sensitive to the fact that, you know, the one that you just finished is the one that you care about the most, because, you know, it's a very nervous situation at the moment, you know, and you all sort of cross your fingers that all you know, the people are going to like it. But I don't know. I mean, it's the most important thing is that you can have a big success, and the truth is, you put the same amount of effort into a movie as something that didn't make any money, you know. So in that regard, it's, you know, the films that I feel sometimes most proud of are the smaller ones that, you know, that made 10 cents and 14 people went to see, you know. So in the end, it's not what other people think about your work, it's what you think about your work. But I am proud of it, and I'm very happy if that's all I get remembered for.
Alan, do you ever get worried about movie reviews? Because someone like Madonna, she's an icon, and, you know, film critics can actually, you know, take pretty much easy pot shots on her performance, etc., etc. I mean, I read a recent review that was quite biased, and, you know, this is a good movie, but a lot of critics might actually just take pot shots because it's an easy target.
Yeah, I think that, you know, tell you the truth, that's par for the course. You know, you have to be grown up about that. When you first start out and making movies, you always think that's going to be your first and your last movie, and you're a little bit sensitive to it. But then you close your eyes and you think, well, I did 12 movies already, and you know, pick the bones out of that lot. You can't be affected. If you get affected by it, you're never going to get up in the morning. And there are a lot of very stupid people writing reviews, and there are also a lot of very smart ones, actually. But I mean, and they also don't like your film sometimes. You really have to take it on the chin, because it's not possible ever to get completely 100% good reviews. No one ever does, you know. And I think it actually bloats the importance of a lot of very bad writers to actually worry about what they might think about it.
Does Madonna have a lot riding on the success or failure of this film?
Well, in so much as that she's been extraordinarily professional in, she's devoted 2 years of her life, at a point in her life when 2 years she's put her entire recording, you know, a normal recording career on hold in order to do this. She's got a lot riding on it, yeah, but she's you know, I think she's done extraordinarily well. I think that you know, it's worth all the effort that she's put in.
In those 2 years that you've devoted to this, looking back on them now, what would you say was one of the really wonderful highlights? I can see there's been lots of problems and all that, and nightmares, but what was one of the time when you thought, gee, this is really worth it, it just all came together for you?
I think, you know, when we did get the balcony of the Casa Rosada and walking out there and seeing all those extras beneath you, and standing there on the spot where Eva Peron and Juan Peron stood, and your entire job is about replication, you know, in movies where our job is illusion, and suddenly it wasn't an illusion, it was really real. And all of the extras were Argentinians, and very, in a way, I think that they probably did think that they were looking at Eva Peron up there. That moment going out on the balcony was probably most special, you know, that not just this movie, of many movies that I've ever done, because it very rarely occurs, you know, in one's professional life.
Did Madonna share that moment?
Sorry,
I think so, yeah. I think she had the same feeling, yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Okay, so we're back from our interview with Evita filmmaker Alan Parker. What's interesting regarding Alan Parker is post Evita, he directed the 1999 film Angela's Ashes. I was actually at the press junket.
Frank McCourt.
Yes, I was actually at the press junket. I believe it was held in New York. After that, he directed the 2003 film The Life of David Gale, which starred Kevin Spacey and Kate Winslet. But after that, he hasn't done a film since. So... I mean, by the time of, he was born in 1944, by the time of 2003 rolling around, he was still he was still relatively young. So it's weird that he hasn't done a film since 2003's The Life of David Gale. So
yeah, I wonder what's going on. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's definitely been a while, and he was pretty much at the top of his game. But anyways, he is missed film-wise. That's all we have to say about Alan Parker.
So now we get to Madonna.
Okay.
I don't know whether biomaterial is even necessary with her. She's kind of a legend. You know, it's hard to explain to anybody who wasn't a teenager in the 1980s just how huge Madonna was. I mean, I think the closest comparison we can make right now is Beyonce, but even that doesn't quite work because our world was just so different back then. We didn't have the internet pulling our focus in a million different directions. We didn't have hundreds of TV channels to choose from. Kids listened to the radio all the time, and a shocking number of us spent hours every day watching music videos on MTV because back then they showed music videos on MTV. So pop stars were a major part of youth culture, much more than they are today. And the very top of that heap was Madonna and probably also Michael Jackson. And with both of them, even if you weren't really a fan, like, you know, you never saw them in concert or you never bought any of their albums, you still knew every word to all their singles because they were just everywhere. You couldn't get away from those songs. And like all music, when you hear it enough times, it would seep into your DNA. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that it kind of became part of the whole world's shared cultural shorthand. Now, by 1996, when this junket took place, Madonna's popularity was no longer quite at that zenith anymore. But she was still a major icon, especially to those of us who had grown up when she was on top. So even though all of us had spent years talking to celebrities to the point where all traces of being starstruck had left us long ago, when Madonna walks into the room and she sits down across the table from you, your only reasonable response to that is, oh my God, it's her. So Greg, you were at this junket too. We were both there. What was your impression of her?
I thought she was fine. She seemed a bit distant during the interview, but then listening back to the tape, that was a false impression probably I received because maybe I was, you mentioned the table, maybe I was too far from her purview. I just remember her to be accommodating, but the interview, when you listen to it, it's a lot more insightful than I originally had perceived it at the time.
Well, I would agree with that assessment of distant. I'll tell you my impression. I remember that I had been a little bit nervous about this interview because I was wondering whether it was going to be adversarial. You have to remember she had spent literally decades just being constantly attacked by the tabloids. Even the legitimate press was obsessed with her love life, and that can kind of make you feel, you know, less than friendly towards journalists in general. So I was thinking maybe she was going to be cold and defensive, and she sort of was, but not exactly. I mean, she wasn't like super warm. It wasn't like Robin Williams walking in and treating us all like friends. It was more, I guess, businesslike. You know, like we're all here to work, so tell me what you need and I will give you that. And you could feel her being careful and watching what she said and trying not to give more than was absolutely necessary. But I completely got it. And I mean, I still do. I get it. She had been burned so many times. It was actually great that she even showed up at all. Because let's face it, she didn't have to. She had the clout to say, I'm not doing publicity. But this project obviously meant a lot to her, and she wanted to promote it. And so she did the interviews, and we were thrilled to get her. So I think I would say that she was guarded, but professional. Which, by the way, is exactly the same impression I got whenever we interviewed Julia Roberts.
Yes.
You know, not super friendly, not like I'm happy to see you, but, you know, let's do this thing, let's get it over with, kind of. You know, but not in a bad way. Like, we're here to work, let's work.
Yeah, you know, from the interview, just listening to it, I was actually surprised, even though, like you were saying, she was guarded, but she did give good stuff. Little spoiler, when someone asked her, I forgot who asked her if, looking back, is fame worth it? And she answered a PR, a politically correct response would be say, yeah, you know, I have my good days and I have bad days, and she's just flat out said no. Just it's not worth it. Just walking down the street, she can't walk down the street with her daughter Lourdes, and without being mobbed, and that's a sacrifice that's really not worth sacrificing at all. So she's very honest with that.
Yeah, well, she did achieve a level of fame that even most celebrities don't even come near. I mean, she was just on this whole other level, and I can't imagine what living life like that would be like.
Yeah. No. It's so she alludes to it during the interview. It's a good interview. She does, again, she is a little bit guarded, but just listen to the words, listen to what she has to say. It's a pretty cool talk with Madonna.
Yes, and we start with Kathy Kogan's agenda question, which is asking about favorite Christmas memories.
What's yours, Matt?
My favorite agenda question?
Your favorite Christmas memory?
Well, there was that one awesome Christmas when the candles burned for 8 days.
Ah, wonderful. So for more about Madonna's Christmas memories and her thoughts on fame and most importantly, the making of Evita, here is Madonna.
Welcome.
How are you?
Hi.
Hi. Welcome.
Hello. Oh, thank you.
How are you?
Hi. Hi. What are you doing here?
I'm interviewing you for Kiss for the Rick D.
Oh my God. My new best friend. I'm good. Madonna, I don't know if my jacket can take any more microphones. As we get started here, I wanted to ask you, you're doing a Christmas special featuring Evita, and since it opens on Christmas, I was curious if you could talk to me about Christmas memories, especially while making the film, and if it altered how you celebrated your holiday and how it might be having this film open on Christmas for you.
Has making the movie made me look at Christmas in a different way?
While you were making the movie, you were very busy. Did holidays change, and what might this year's holiday be like?
Well, by the time I get to Christmas, I will probably collapse in a heap on the floor after all the premieres I'm going to be going to and interviews I'll be giving, and I think I'll be in a coma on Christmas Day. Obviously, it's going to be different for me because I have a daughter, but she's not old enough to understand it or open up her own Christmas present, so and when she is, then I think it's going to really make a difference.
What was it about Ava that just said to you, you had to do it, it was yours?
I think she was a remarkable woman, and I think she had an incredible life. She died in a very tragic way, and I think that she had a real sense of destiny since she was a young girl, that her life would be what it was, and I was attracted to all of those things.
Are there similarities at all, do you think, between her?
I think her sense of destiny, I think her determination to make something of her life, the courage that was required to go from a small town to a big city without knowing anyone, and what she made of herself. She went from nothing to something, as I said, quite remarkable. So, and I was attracted to those things, and I identified with those things.
What was the biggest challenge in making this film?
The biggest challenge, I think, making a musical in a very naturalistic way, making it not appear over the top or operatic, but natural and realistic.
Antonio said he thought that this was therapy for you, that you had to do this film.
I know, I keep hearing that from everyone. Thanks, Antonio. Well, I think all creative experiences where you put your blood, sweat, and tears into something end up being cathartic for all artists. I had a tremendous sense of accomplishment when it was all over with, and that makes you feel good.
In the death scene, I was surrounded by the sound of Kleenex, including some of my own Madonna. When you watched that movie for the first time, did you cry?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember how you felt?
I wasn't really sure why I was crying. I don't know if I was moved by my own performance or happy that it turned out good, it was probably all of the above.
Was that your favorite scene?
Yeah, I think so.
There's a great line in the film where you say, "The people need Evita. The people need me." And I'm wondering, do you feel that the people need, without being very cynical about it, do you feel that the people need Madonna in terms of a pop icon to look up to?
I don't think it's necessarily me that they need, but I think people like me, they need. People who are strong, opinionated, intelligent, brave. I mean, obviously, I think those things of myself, and I think that we do need people like that to look up to.
Does it get any easier as time goes on with all the pressure? Does it get any easier to, quote, be Madonna, to live in the type of atmosphere that's almost inconceivable for us? Does it get any easier to do that?
No. No.
And are you amazed at how much...
Does it get any easier to answer those questions?
No.
Are you amazed at how much interest there seems to be in your every movement? And in a sense, has it been worth it for you to realize that you've given up all of...
No, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to lose your privacy. And it does amaze me.
Are there times when you've ever thought, forget it, let me just go off into a farm somewhere and
yes,
the business?
Absolutely.
But you put your career on hold during the process of making this film. What are you going to do?
But that is my career. I'm doing what I do. I mean, I didn't put it on hold. I was doing what I wanted to do.
You worked so hard in the late. You were telling us having a vocal coach and everything, because this is an operetta and all. And now that you have this expanded range, and you did it beautifully, incidentally. Are you going to continue? And I mean, are we going to see other things in albums and in future things where you're going to, really
definitely
showcase this voice?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there something coming up that we could?
I can only tell you that I intend to go back into the studio and start writing music again after the first of the year. So we'll see how all of my training has affected that.
Did you feel a point where you expanded that range, and what did you do? Did you go singing different songs that you hadn't been able to sing before in terms of range?
No, because all I was doing and all I have been doing is the music from Evita. That's just been eating, sleeping, and drinking it.
You stood on the balcony where Evita stood, and can you describe that experience, knowing that you were standing in the spot where she stood?
Well, anything I would say would not really describe how I felt. It wouldn't, there isn't a word, but I will try. It was a very magical and rewarding experience, because just from an historical perspective, I knew that she once stood there, and in fact many times stood there addressing the crowds. And so just from that perspective, as an actress portraying her, it was so great to stand where she stood. And then the fact that we had been told for months and months that we couldn't go out on the balcony and that they weren't going to let us film there. And then finally, to be able to walk out on there was a real sense of victory. And then to look down into all the extras' faces, and many of them were crying. It was such a real emotional moment. I think a lot of them were having a sense of deja vu, or reliving their memories of Evita, and it was an amazing experience.
Alan Parker said you were the one who did that.
That your celebrity and this iconism is in a sense not worth it, and I'm wondering if now being a mom really crosses the T's and dots the I on that. In other words, does that really bring it home, that loss of your anonymity?
Yes.
And could you explain a little bit about that, and maybe when you actually realize that this is so?
Well, for instance, I can't go for a walk on the street with her, and that really brings it home more than anything. I mean, just really simple things that other people do and I think take for granted. Also, where I live is going to be affected by it. Where she goes to school is going to be affected by it. I can't make those decisions the ways that other people do. I have to take a lot more things into consideration.
Just to follow up a little bit on Reynolds' question, when he said, "Have you ever been tempted to just go off and live on a farm?" And you said,
Yeah.
"Yes, you have."
What farm?
What? Yeah, where can I find it? What keeps you in the limelight then? What keeps you doing the public eye thing?
Well, the work. You know, having a chance to do something like this movie. I knew that it was going to be crazy when I went down to Argentina. I knew that there were going to be all sorts of parallels drawn between my character and her. I knew all these things, but the chance to play her in a movie was it was such a privilege and an honor that I felt that it was going to be worth the sacrifices that I would have to make.
Alan Parker said that your research involved going there early and meeting with people who actually knew Evita.
Yeah.
What did you learn about her, or how well do you feel you know her from that?
I feel that I know her as well as you could know a person you've never met. I think I learned about simple things, what kind of music she liked to listen to, what her favorite meal was, what made her laugh, silly things. I saw her in a much more human way than I think she was portrayed in Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice's musical.
Alan said that it was probably your meeting with the head of the country that got the palace,
Yes.
where everything else hadn't done too much. So
What
what
did
did
you
you
say?
say? Thank you.
I just told him I really think that they believed that we were going to come down there and really just desecrate or denigrate the image of Evita, and I hope I put his mind at ease. I mean, I wanted him to know that I was very passionate about portraying her, that I admired her, that I respected her, and that's how I was going to portray her. And I played the music for him, and I think what happened is that somebody translated the musical into Spanish for him and then gave him the Reader's Digest version of that, and I don't think he actually really understood what kind of a movie we were making, and possibly assumed or expected the worst, and I got him to see that in fact it was the opposite what we were doing.
How about the music? What do you think it is about these songs that makes this such a special piece?
There's a melancholy running through all the music that is just so moving. Even if you didn't have the visual, there's something very emotional and sad about it. It's something you can't explain, and they're genius, really.
Madonna, there's a lot of pressure on this movie to bring back the movie musical. I was wondering what you thought about that, and also there's a lot of pressure on you to bring back the movie musical.
Oh, the pressure. Well, I think it would be great if that happened. I think that musicals kind of fell out of favor because audiences became very cynical and jaded, and they didn't want to believe, wouldn't or couldn't believe somebody, walking down the street and then all of a sudden bursting into song. It's kind of a fantasy and not realistic. I think that the fact that our movie is all music and all the dialogue is all sung kind of helps you suspend your belief a lot easier than, say, a traditional musical where there's dialogue and then singing.
A few years ago, you were asked the question, what do you get from making movies that you don't get from making music? And I think you tied it both together, but how has that changed? I mean, what do you get these days from making music or making movies, vice versa, that you don't get from the other?
Well, you get a nice big trailer when you're making a movie. It's a different art form. When you're writing a song or singing a song, it's much more, it's very direct. It comes out of you, and nothing stands in the way of that interpretation, of that emotion, of that expression. Making movies is a much more collaborative effort. There are a lot of people involved. It's not just the director's influence, it's the cinematographer's influence, it's the production designer's influence, it's all the other actors in it. And then the editor, when everything's done, exercise an influence on it too in the cutting room. So, you know, it's just, as I said, it's a much more collaborative effort, and singing a song is much more direct.
Are you comfortable with that kind of lack of control? I mean,
I am when I am surrounded by incredibly talented people.
You've had your own production company. Are you working on anything film-wise yourself right now?
Yes. I'm developing a screenplay of a book that I would like to direct myself.
What book?
It's called Going Down.
And the story?
It's and by the way, the girl who wrote the book is writing the screenplay. I'm just working with her on it. It's about a girl. It's like a year out of a young girl's life in New York City. She's 19 years old, and she wants to become an actress, and she becomes a prostitute for 1 year to pay for her acting classes. And it's a comedy. I mean, it's very funny.
Tough enough to make a movie like this, but then to find that you're pregnant and filming still isn't completed. Did you have any doubts about whether you'd be able to handle it, or did you think? How did you feel?
I thought I could handle it, because I take good care of myself and I'm fairly resilient. I mean, I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to feel, but I ended up feeling pretty great. I think I had anxiety that I kept waiting for that day when I was going to really feel horrible and not be able to get out of bed, but that never happened, so filming just went along as planned.
You've had a lot of pain in your life, you've had a lot of fame, you've had a lot of excitement and joy. How does that compare to having a child?
It doesn't. There's nothing like it. There's nothing as incredible.
Do you sing to her?
Pardon me?
Do you sing to her?
Oh, yeah.
What do you sing?
Have you written
I'll never tell.
Have you written a lullaby?
I make up songs all the time, and they're really silly and completely embarrassing, and I won't sing them for you.
More
do you have a sense of how
actresses say
motherhood-
that they're taking on projects geared towards, after they become a parent, they're taking on projects geared towards their kids, something their kids can appreciate. Have you
Really?
considered that at all? Yeah, everybody.
I mean, you'll just have to do a cameo with Barney if you want something that your kid can appreciate.
Disney's standing right there. We don't say Barney.
Thank you.
Oh.
You're finished. Thank you. That was
Bye.
Will you only direct Going Down, or will you star in it too?
No, just direct.
Direct it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Madonna, how'd you like your Christmas gift from work?
Tell him thank you. I'm already using that toaster oven.
Are you?
Yes.
Thanks a million. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, Chris. Nice to see you.
So we were back from the Madonna interview. Matt, I'm
Hello
sure
again.
Hello, Matt. Hi. I'm sure you have a lot of insights regarding
I
Madonna.
don't have a lot. I basically just have one. She talked about a movie that she was developing called Going Down that she was going to direct. And she did spend some time working with first-time novelist Jennifer Bell to turn it into a screenplay. Now, so far, that movie has not been made, but Greg, here's a fun life hack for you. Never, under any circumstances, should you Google the words Madonna Going Down.
Okay. Listeners, please listen to that. Don't do it. Don't do it. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. Okay, so next up, that's Evita, right? Oh, you got one more? You got one more?
No, I don't. So now we come to the part of the show where we switch from Evita to Poetic Justice, and our audience switches out as well. So we say goodbye to the Broadway fans, we say hello to the rap music fans, and we say thank you for sticking around for the entire thing, Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Very good.
Little Venn diagram there.
A Venn diagram, yes. Very cool.
If you are a fan of 90s rap, Poetic Justice doesn't just give you Tupac Shakur. You've also got Tone Loc as his friend, and Q-Tip as Janet Jackson's boyfriend who gets murdered at the drive-in at the beginning. Writer-director John Singleton has a thing for casting hip-hop musicians in acting roles who you wouldn't necessarily expect to be a good actor, such as Busta Rhymes, Andre 3000, Snoop Dogg, Monique, and Marky Mark.
Very, very astute, sir.
So we start with John Singleton. Now, Greg, before we get to the bio stuff, I'll throw it to you in a minute. I want to give you a little bit of pre-first movie stuff.
Yeah.
John Singleton grew up in South Central L.A., though he graduated from high school in Pasadena. He attended film school at USC. He worked as a PA on the TV show Pee-wee's Playhouse, which is where he first met Lawrence Fishburne, who he later wound up casting in several films. Fishburne, you might remember, played Cowboy Curtis on the show. When he was writing the script for Boys in the Hood, he was working as an intern on the Arsenio Hall show. Shortly after that, he did an internship at Columbia Pictures, where it was his job to read scripts. He complained about the quality of the scripts, and he said that his were better, so the director of the program asked him to see his work. And he read some, he liked them, and he passed them on to a friend of his at Creative Artists Agency. And literally days later, like 3 days later, CAA signed him. Remember, he was still at school at the time. He took a meeting with Russell Simmons, the chairman of Def Jam Records, who was negotiating a production deal with Columbia Pictures. Simmons loved Singleton's script for Boys in the Hood, so he called John Peters at Columbia to rave about it. Peters read it, and he agreed, and he wound up signing a multi-picture deal with John Singleton instead of with Russell Simmons. The first of the films he directed was Boys in the Hood in 1991, and that film earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Director. He was 24 years old, so he was the youngest person ever to be nominated in this category, and he was also the first African-American ever to be nominated in this category. A year later, 1992, he directed the music video for Michael Jackson's Remember the Time, and then the following year, 1993, he directed his second film, Poetic Justice, of course starring Michael's sister, Janet Jackson. So, Greg, why don't you take us through some of the films that came afterwards?
I mean, yeah, after Poetic Justice, he did a 1995 film, Higher Learning, which I remember doing the press junket for. I think it was somewhere in Westwood. It was a campus racial drama thing with Michael Rappaport was in it. It's actually a change of pace from
a veteran of our podcast.
Yeah, he was actually. I think Higher Learning is one of my favorite performances from Michael Rappaport. After '95, then he directed the 1997 film Rosewood, which he received a lot of critical acclaim. That movie, unfortunately, when it was released. By the way, Rosewood, John Singleton, I believe, alludes to towards the tail end of the interview.
I don't remember that.
Yeah,
but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, he was towards the end of the interview. John Singleton's a little bit coy about upcoming projects. I think one of the things that he was talking about was Rosewood. I could be wrong.
Okay.
Anyways, after that, it's one of my favorite from his is in 2000, he directed a remake of Shaft with Samuel L. Jackson and who else?
Perfect casting, by the way.
Perfect casting. And who else? Jeffrey Wright was in it. Christian Bale as one of the main villains is excellent in that film.
Right. Isaac Hayes coming back to re-record the theme.
Yeah, very cool film. I thought everything was cool, going really, really well for Singleton after Shaft. I thought, now he's going to be off doing just really high budget studio tentpole films.
Sure.
After that, in 2001, give him credit, he went back to his Boys in the Hood indie roots with Baby Boy, which starred, I believe Tyrese Gibson was in it, and Ving Rhames, I believe, was in it. Yeah, so Baby Boy.
Well, Tyrese Gibson is in a lot of his films. He keeps working with him over and over again.
Yeah. So there it goes. After Baby Boy, going back to Tyrese, a couple years later, we're talking about tentpole films. He did Too Fast, Too Furious. He did Four Brothers. Everything was rolling
with Marky Mark.
With Marky Mark, aka Mark Wahlberg. Four Brothers was released in 2005. The interesting thing is, other than a 30 for 30 episode on Marion Jones, it took him another 6 years before he directed a full-length feature. And that full-length feature was the action film Abduction, which came out and it just was not a hit. It was one of those movies that was supposed to launch the A-list career of Twilight actor Taylor Lautner. It just didn't do that great when it came out. So what's funny is after directing Abduction, Singleton hasn't really directed a film since 2011. Nothing after Abduction. He's done TV stuff like American Crime Story, Empire, Billions, an episode here, episode there. He's also one of the co-creators of this TV series called Snowfall, which came out in 2017. So what's interesting about Singleton's career is he hasn't really done a feature-length film since the 2011 release Abduction. So...
Okay.
Anyways.
Well, but we're going to go back now to 1993 for his second film. This was his sophomore follow-up to Boys in the Hood, Poetic Justice. So
here we are with John Singleton for Poetic Justice. And give us a report back if I was correct on Rosewood. Here we go.
Hello.
How you doing?
All right.
You guys want to introduce yourselves before you start?
Sure. I'm Nancy Harrison, E! Entertainment Radio Network.
Oh, okay.
Kathy Moser, Voice of America.
Okay. Sean Tyler, KPRS, Kansas City, Missouri. All right.
Rachel Rosenman, KFI, and the Associated Press.
Okay.
Laura Gross, LEG Productions, Los Angeles.
Okay.
And Doc Winter, Magic 108 in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay, cool. All right.
So we were talking to some of the women about a man's portrayal of a woman. What made you decide to make a woman's movie?
It's not just to quote a women's movie. You know, there's some strong male characters in it. You know, there's stuff for people other than women too. It's just that the central character in the film is a woman. So let's redefine just that. The movie's described as movie's described as a street romance. Mm-hmm. You see, and you can't have a great movie with just women in it because you have to have some combustibility and some conflict in it, and that's born out of the conflict, like interaction between men and women. And so there's definitely that in this movie.
What inspired the story then?
I was just sitting up editing Boys in the Hood, and I was thinking, well, I got to get another movie done. This was 2 years ago, and I knew that Boys was going to be a hit, and I said, I got to do something. I got to get it done quick. And I was thinking, well, all these people were, all these brothers are getting shot. What's happening to their girlfriends? What happens to a woman when her boyfriend gets shot? What's going through her mind? What kind of life does she have afterwards? And that was just a springboard for it. And I woke up one night and I said, hey, I want to do a movie about this girl. Her name will be Justice, and she writes poetry as a catharsis for all the pain and tension that she has in her life. And what we'll do is we'll have the poetry over different images of what goes on.
What made you decide to, I'm a big fan of Maya Angelou. What made you decide to incorporate her poetry?
Dr. Angelou's work has been with me ever since I was a child. So, and she's like my favorite poet, so that's where that came from.
How did it come about?
Well, I was trying to write the script and I was trying to write the poetry myself, and then at one point I said, I gotta get an accomplished poet. I gotta have some really, some great poetry here, and there's no way I'm gonna write the poetry of a young black woman. So I incorporated some of Dr. Angelou's work into the script, and then I set about getting her permission to use the poetry in the film. And so we had breakfast, and I met her, and I presented her with a red rose, and we sat and talked, and she recited poetry to me, and made me swoon. And I let her read my screenplay, and she liked it, and she gave me permission.
Did she help you choose what poems to use in your film?
No, they were already. I chose them myself. They were already in the script.
Was Janet Poetic Justice? Was she the person you had in mind?
Yeah, Janet was the person I had in mind from the beginning. It was all this is part of my master plan and everything. I wrote the script, and I met Janet while I was writing the script, and she had no idea that I was working on the script for her to star in, and we became friends. And about 8 months later, I ended up presenting her with a screenplay, and I said, I just want you to read this and tell me what you think. She read it. She said, this is excellent. And I said, well, I want you to do it. And she said, you really? You want me? And I said, yeah, I want you to do this. And then she said, okay. And it was just like a bond was forged there,
Why did you think she would be right, and were you concerned at all about...
No, I wasn't concerned about none of that stuff. Because you got to understand, Janet was acting before she became a big pop star, and not everybody remembers that. So I'm not a genius. I'm just a practical thinker. The woman was acting before, and not everything that she does on stage is her. It's an act too. She's a show woman. She's a Renaissance woman. There's so many different things that she can do. And my whole plan was to do a movie with her that would be totally out of the vein. Where her character would be totally out of the vein of anything anybody's ever seen her do before.
When you write a character, do you often write it with an actor in mind?
I often do. I always do. I usually have to have kind of framework for the character. You know, and I think about what the actor has done, what the actor hasn't done before, what would make that actor really uncomfortable, what kind of scenes that make the actor really uncomfortable, and I just go ahead and do it. You know, I find myself writing sometime and I think, wow, I can't write that, I can't put that down, and I say, damn it, I'm gonna do it. You know what I'm saying? Just do it. You know, and then it's just, it comes out beautiful. You know, because everything, all storytelling is born out of dramatic conflict. You know, and I feel that if you have a good hand on that, then you can tell really good stories. You see what I'm saying? You know, the rise and falls of different people and cadences of different people's emotions. You have to be in tune to all that.
What scenes did you think? I think somebody has their monitor up. That's what's causing the feedback. So, sorry. What scenes did you think would be difficult for her to do that you said, yeah, push the envelope?
Just, you know, I mean, I didn't think it difficult. It's not a matter of difficulty. It's a matter of there's certain times where a character feels uncomfortable, and you want, you know, that person to be uncomfortable too, so it comes out. You know what I'm saying? Just like when they had their argument scene. You know what I'm saying? You know. Yeah, that's supposed to be like this. She's supposed to be uncomfortable and everything like this, right? You know, and it was a trip. You know, she was uncomfortable. You know, you had to get that anger out. You know, you know.
That's one of the best scenes. Too.
Yeah, it's like the scene that, you know, be like, I can't believe it. You know what I'm saying? You know, you're like, oh man, I can't believe it. You know. Yeah.
Do you ever have a fear? One of the things about your movies that I enjoy is the way that you depict African American lifestyles. Do you ever have a fear that sometimes in depicting these lifestyles that you often perpetuate things?
Perpetuate what?
I mean, my example would be the scenario that African American men want to be rappers, and the character Tupac.
Well, but he doesn't want to be a rapper. He wants to help his cousin be a rapper. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
I understand.
It's just like, you know, that was, you know, that wasn't the intent, you know, and I'm not interested really in you know, what one person's, you know, what a certain people are going to think about whatever, and what kind of judgments they're going to make on me because of the films I make. My job is just to make the movie, you know, and it's, you know, it's up to anybody else, you know, if they want to see it or whatever. You know, I can't get mired and all that. I know one thing: the characters in my movie, black, white, or whatever, have more of a dimension than the characters I see in most American films right now, because I do put more work into my characters than a lot of people do. You know, my characters act and talk like real people talk. They may say one thing and then they'll do another thing, or they, you know, you see what I'm saying? Their sentences, they'll stop something in the middle of a sentence.
Is that why you like improvisation a lot and ad-lib?
Well, I did more improvisation on this movie than on my first movie. My first movie was like straight script, just read the lines, you know. And this one, I think since I'm growing, I allow the actors to have a little bit more freedom.
Now, John, this film was shooting the day the King verdict came out. Did that affect the set at all on the shoot?
No, not. I mean, yeah, really, it affected it in a way that people wanted to find out if their families were like safe and stuff like that, you know. And that's about it. But we, you know, we just kept on shooting. You know, we were the only production that didn't shut down.
Is South Central LA almost another character in this film? Do you think we talked about that earlier with the other people?
I mean, you know, the environment is a character in the sense that they get away from the environment, and they, you know, it allows them to open up to each other, and some people can't escape where they're from. You know, what you see in the movie too.
One theme I saw in both Boys in the Hood and Poetic Justice is the importance of a strong family, and I was wondering, is that something that was born out of your real life experience?
It's just the fact that, you know, my mother and father never married, but my pops was always around there for me, and you know, that's just like, it's not something. It ends up not being an intentional thing. It ends up just pervading, you know, just coming out somehow.
We talked about how you have this scene where the guy gets the phone call and we never know what the phone call's about.
Yeah, well, that's because everything can't be expressly laid out for you, you know, in my films. You know, I don't want that. I want people to think, You know, I want the audience to have an active participation in what they do. You know, I'm totally against this American way of making a film that explains everything to you. Everything to you is explained to you. Life is not like that. You know, there should be a little bit of ambiguity there so that people can think. You know, and it sparks kind of like thought.
So you're not going to tell us what you were
No,
thinking of.
I'm not telling you what I was thinking. I was just saying, you know, it can be whatever you want it to be. But I can tell you that that's going to happen a lot more in some of my films.
Would you be interested in directing a film with an all-white cast with a theme totally different?
Well, it depends on what the situation was and everything, you know. I mean, I think my casts are going to get more and more diverse with the, you know, as I grow as a person and as a filmmaker, you know.
What are you working on now?
I can't tell you.
Oh, we read it in the notes that most of the scenes in this film, or the characters, were all based on real-life incidents that you had researched. Can you give us any idea of how you fleshed it out?
Well, what happens is, you know, while I was working on this film, I talked to a lot of hairdressers, and they just told me, you know, they co-opted the script and told me, while I was working on the script, and told me, you need to have a person like this, you need to have somebody say this, and girls would come to me and give me bits and lines of dialogue. You know, so this all comes from like different girls. You know, this script was put together by all kinds of different girls.
When you're writing, when you're writing a script, are you also directing it?
Yes, I do. I do. I have it. It's a screenplay is like a blueprint to a film. You know, you don't have to follow directly, but it's a blueprint as a skeleton. Just as an an architect may write a blueprint for a building, and that building, that edifice, is only as strong as as strong as the blueprint is as well thought out. And so that's where screenwriting comes in. You know, the film is only as good as its screenplay, or as the person who is in charge of putting together, the architect, the director, is in putting the whole project together.
How did you choose Cambria?
Cambria are really good writers around that, that want to do the kind of projects I want to do. I mean, there's a lot of people that want to do stuff that's just like straight mainstream, from a, what I'm saying? It's just like whatever. It doesn't have the cadences and doesn't have the language and the different vernacular. All that stuff has to be written by somebody who has a hand on the contemporary feel of what goes on, but at the same time can put in a kind of like classical kind of structure that makes it, that rises above just like being just hip. You see what I'm saying?
You said you don't really care what reviewers say or what, but do you care about box office? How many people go to see? I mean, obviously you make it for people to see it.
Yeah. People are gonna go see this movie. I mean, that just helps me get another movie made.
And obviously you do it because you want people to see it, I assume.
Yeah, I do it because I want people to see it.
Do you feel that Janet Jackson's involvement will make this a film that everyone in America will want to see rather than just African Americans?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, did you think about that in even, thinking of her as the character? Or?
Come on now, I'm a businessman. Of course I did.
Well, that was an honest answer. You said a lot of people don't want to make the kinds of movies you want to make.
Well, a lot of people, really are not in film because they truly love film. They're in film because they're like, it's a way to make a lot of money. It's like, I think that you should choose your career just like you choose a wife, first for the love and, then for the money, And I'm more in it for the love because I don't think that I could sustain a career, in the long term if I was just in this for the bucks.
A great deal of pressure because Boys in the Hood.
No, I didn't. That's something that people try to put upon me. My whole angst was just about getting another movie made so I can get on to the next movie. You see what I'm saying? I'm sure you people wouldn't be here talking to me 2 years later, if Boys in the Hood was the only film I'd ever done. I did that movie. That was a great experience. I did this movie. This is a great experience, and I'm going to do another movie, and that'll be a great experience.
One of the problems in St. Louis that arose during Malcolm X is the theaters were giving a different ticket to people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think Columbia is going to end up letting that happen. They got to get every dollar they can get, you know. And they're expecting this to be a big hit, so they ain't gonna like. They're gonna be on the exhibitors.
How do you feel when you hear stuff like that, though?
You know, it makes me upset, but at the same time, as long as I can check my situation, you know, and make sure it doesn't happen on my project, then you know, I'm cool.
What was that?
Well, what they were doing is if you'd go buy a ticket for Malcolm X, they'd give you the stub to
Some
another
other
movie,
movie.
some other movie, and so the money.
Oh.
So it looked like the box office was less for Malcolm X than it actually was.
Yeah, there was a lot of people wanting to see it.
That's interesting. What kinds of movies do you like to see? You were talking about.
I just like to see different movies. I like to go to movies and see something I ain't seen before. I like to go to movies with my expectations low and then come out like, wow.
Has there been a movie recently that's done that for you?
I mean, yeah, you know, like just a couple. Like Jurassic Park was pretty good and everything, and you know, you see something that you've never seen before, you know. But it's not just I'm not just talking in terms of special effects. I'm talking about in terms of emotions and in terms of, you know, not the explosions that you see, car chases and everything like that. I'm talking about emotional explosions. There are not a lot of films that you go to now that you feel like you laugh and you cry and do all that kind of stuff, and those are the kind of films that I want to make, you know.
Would you be interested in directing an Eddie Murphy or Denzel Washington?
Yeah,
in any kind of
I'm in tune with those people, and I've already talked to them about different projects that we can get involved in.
You said that you'd like to see your films become more diverse as you grow. Do you think you'll move your locales as well?
Yes, of course. My next film doesn't not happen in South Central Los Angeles.
Would you like to do films in Europe? Or?
I don't know about all that. Yeah, it's just...
This should be the last question.
Who takes the last question? We're coming up with our good last. Well, I guess you won't tell us about your next project.
No,
so.
all I can tell you is my next film is about America.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And sure enough, his next movie was about America, as most movies are. His follow-up actually turned out to be 1995's Higher Learning, with a very good cast: Omar Epps, Christy Swanson, Michael Rappaport, Jennifer Connelly, Ice Cube, and Lawrence Fishburne, as well as Regina King, who we will hear from in a minute. He also said that he had been talking to Denzel Washington and Eddie Murphy about working with them. To date, I don't believe that they have.
Regina King, she started off her career as a cast member of the Marla Gibbs series 227. Did you ever watch Marla Gibbs in 227? You ever watch that show?
I was aware of the show. I can't say that I watched it.
I never saw Marla Gibbs or Regina King in 227. I'm sure we were missing a bunch. That ran from 1985 to 90. As a grown-up, though, she actually cut her teeth in feature film with her longtime collaborator, John Singleton. Like Matt said, she worked with him in Boys in the Hood, this film, Poetic Justice, and eventually Higher Learning as well.
She was in his first three movies.
This marks her early career. Obviously, she would go on to receive a lot of acclaim for her 1996 performance in Jerry Maguire. And, you know, she started as a character actress in a whole bunch of films like How Stella Got Her Groove Back, Enemy of the State, Mighty Joe Young. The list goes on and on.
I remember her on 24.
She was great on 24, and then several years after 24, she would star in the acclaimed LA set TV series Southland. She was also seen in the acclaimed, I believe it was HBO series The Leftovers. Yeah, and then also she received 3 Emmy Awards recently for her work on ABC's American Crime, which is unfortunately now defunct, but she received her share of acclaim and 3 Emmys for that show, American Crime. But that's not the American Crime days. We're going back to Regina King when she was just a wee lass with Poetic Justice. You have some stuff on her?
I've got a little game for you guys at home. Every time Regina says the words "you know," you have to take a drink. Good luck, everyone.
And here we go with Regina King.
I didn't even recognize you first.
Yet
'tis me without the braids.
You want to start introducing ourselves?
I'm Doc Winter, Assistant Program Director from KMJM in St. Louis, Missouri.
I'm Laura Gross, LEG Productions, Los Angeles.
I'm Rachel Rosenman with KFI and AP, Associate Press.
Sean Tyler, Public Relations Director, KPRS, Kansas City, Missouri.
Kathy Moser, Voice of America, stationed here in Los Angeles.
And Nancy Harrison, E! Entertainment Radio Network.
Hello, all of you.
Hi, how are you?
So tell us about Aisha. What kind of lady is she, do you think? How would you describe her?
She's, I think, first of all, kind of far from a lady. She is someone who is, she's a survivor. She's a survivor. She's gonna be all right in whatever I think she's into, even though it might look kind of shady for a while. She will be all right. She's a person who's out to get whatever she can. She uses people. I think she's also a person who's very unhappy, but she doesn't know it. And I think in the movie you kind of can see that she is by how harshly she speaks to Chicago, that it has to be a problem with her, a personal problem, for anyone to speak that way to someone for that long of a period of time. I think she kind of feels like she really doesn't care about too many people's feelings but herself. You could tell she does feel something for justice, but other than that, I mean, I think it's kind of evident she really could care less, you know, about anyone else.
She doesn't sound like the kind of woman you would probably want to hang with.
No. I mean, I think she is a nice person deep down inside, but she has to kind of like get her stuff together before you can really be able to tell that she is. I think that's the reason why she and Justice are friends, because at one time they were a lot alike, and you know, Justice really knows the real Aisha, and although Justice is growing up and they're growing apart, they're still close, you know.
Do you have any girlfriends like Aisha?
Yes, I do.
You do?
I do. In fact, I did kind of map the character behind one girlfriend in particular. I would never let her know that, but I did. Yeah, definitely had a few friends like Aisha.
Are they still your friends?
Well, no. I mean, I see them. You know, these are girls that I went to high school with. So, you know, I see them and it's like, hey, girl, how are you? You still seeing so-and-so? Okay. You don't have any kids yet, do you? Okay. Take it easy. See you next time. You know, so, I mean, I don't keep any close ties with them. But, yeah, I have some friends like that, unfortunately.
What was it like working with, since this is a women's movie, but it's written by John Singleton.
Yes.
And he's the director.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like working with him? What was the process working with him on your character?
Before we actually had started the movie, we kind of did like an acting workshop almost, where we all researched our characters and kind of, you know, took them further than what you see in the movie, you know, kind of like, you know, to give your character some background so you have, you know, a little bit more motivation. John, he's the type of director that he allows you to do what you want with the character within reason. You know, there was a lot of ad-libbing, a lot of improvisation in the movie. John is the type of guy who tell you, you know, the key points that he wants you to hit on, then he goes back and plays his Game Boy. You know, he's like, his mind, he always has 50 different things on his mind at one time. While he's working on this project, he's busy thinking about and writing his next one. So I think one of the best things about John is that he's fresh. You know, he's new. He's not, you know, he's trying to do new things, you know what I mean? Like, thank God this isn't another Boys in the Hood. A lot of people would like for it to be that, but it's not another Boys in the Hood. It's another story that's out of South Central, but it's another aspect of black life, and I think it's going to be refreshing, although there's a lot of, you know, explicit language, you know, but other than that, if people can get over that, I think it's going to be refreshing to see a movie where you have two young blacks fall in love. I mean, we haven't seen that since like Sparkle. I mean, that's the last time we've seen a young black couple fall in love. I mean,
it just, and I mean, not to just even limit it to blacks, it's not that often. I mean, now that the Brat Pack is dead, you never really see too many young couples falling in love in the movies. So I think it's going to be like, wow, about time, you know?
Did you think his portrayal of women was real? Did you think that? Like,
yeah, I believe it was accurate. When John writes, he writes from real life instances. You know, he was, I'm sure, influenced by a lot of women who he has dealt with in the past. I believe it's a woman's movie, but I don't think it's from a woman's perspective. You know, I believe it's from a man's perspective. I think that John, because, you know, he was born and raised in South Central, that, you know, his view of the movie or his perspective is a little bit more accurate than a lot of others, you know.
How do you feel about the portrayal of African Americans in this film? Do you think it's sympathetic, accurate, fair?
I think it's all of that. I think you see so many different types in this movie. You have, you know, just the women alone. You have Jessie, who's a woman who and although Jessie, Aisha, and Justice are all three strong women. They're three very different women, but they're all strong women. You have Jessie, who you can tell that she's been abused by, not physically, but by men, or not satisfied by men for so long that she's numb to them now. It's almost like she only uses them for a physical thing because she has everything else under control. I think with Justice, she's had a taste of being with a man who does care for her, and that's made her more, you know, a little bit more understanding. Aisha just really, poor Aisha, just really has no clue on men whatsoever. But you still see that all three of these women are strong women regardless of their situation.
In depicting African American life, are you ever concerned? For example, Tupac's character, he was a mailman trying to be a rapper. You ever concerned that we kind of burn that thing? You know, why couldn't Tupac be somebody
definitely.
who was going up to Oakland maybe to start a business with a friend of his or something like that?
Right. Yeah, I agree. I would agree with that. Just because, just from Boys in the Hood, once that movie had come out, it was almost a whole, like it was in to write these type of movies, or to have movies that are kind of based around, or where rap is kind of, you know, intertwined with the actual story. I think, and I do say this every day, it's almost all the time when I speak to someone, you know, that I haven't seen, I was like, well, what are you doing now? Oh, yeah, I'm working on some music, you know, and it's kind of, you know, unfortunate that it is like that, and I think that we do need to have more movies that show other alternatives than, you know, the entertainment industry, because it's not all what it looks like. You know, it looks really glamorous, and it's not all glamour, not at all, you know, and I think with people like Spike Lee and John Singleton opening more doors, that for young writers and directors, there will be more movies that are written that will, you know, showcase other aspects of, you know, of the work field. You know, it's not, you know, blacks don't just only have to sing, dance, act, and play sports, you know.
Did you learn anything about Janet Jackson that nobody else knows that you could tell us?
That she's not a recluse. You know, she's not a person that, you know, like a vampire, you know. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest myths about the Jackson family, is that they don't, you know, there's no one close to them other than their family.
Did you go into the part thinking, well, she's probably going to be such and such? Do you have any preconceived notions about her?
When I first had gotten the part, I was like, ooh, I'm about to do a movie with Janet Jackson. Oh, my God, let me call everybody. I really didn't care. You know, I'm not an inquirer type person, so and actually, the recluse is the only rumor that I can think of, you know, off the top of my head, you know. She is the type of person, she's funny. She's funny. She can have fun. You know what I mean? She says things that I guess for anyone else, you would think, oh my gosh, she's Janet Jackson. She shouldn't be saying that. You know, not that I'm saying that she'll say something really lewd or, you know, something rude, you know. But I mean, she's normal. You know, she's a normal person, and I think it's kind of unfair that, and I think it's part of the media's fault that they kind of build this, you know, weirdo family up out of the Jacksons, and it's not fair. You know, she has a lot to deal with. We know just being normal people is hard enough, and we're all weird in some kind of way, you know.
Did any of the family come on the set at any time?
No, they never. No. I kind of get the feeling that Janet and Jackie and Michael are really close, because those are the two that I hear her speak about the most, you know. Her family did support her, you know. Her mother would always call, you know. And, you know, she let us, we were able to get really close, you know, during the movie, all of us, you know. So I feel like it was a blessed experience. I feel lucky, totally.
Whenever you work with someone, there's usually some kind of I'm sorry, I was going to joke otherwise. There's usually some kind of surprise about them. Anybody.
Yeah.
You go, oh, wow. I mean, I didn't know they could act like this.
Yeah, exactly.
What was the surprise about Janet?
What would be the surprise? I guess exactly that I was just, I didn't know what to expect when I, you know, was first to meet her. I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't trying to, you know, have a preconception of her, because I didn't want to be acting a certain way, and she's, you know, totally different. But I guess the most surprising thing was just that she's so down to earth, and I think for a person to have given up so much and to still be just so regular, you know what I mean? And, you know, we would even talk sometimes, and she would say, man, Regina, it really gets to her that she can't just go to the store and get some juice if she wants to, you know what I mean? And I think that that's what shocked me, that she knows that she's given it up and she can admit it, and she still misses, you know, a normal lifestyle.
Any relationships developed from the movie, long-lasting, with you or any of the male characters?
No. No. Tupac and I are really... actually with Tupac, it was kind of like I gained a brother, you know, that I've never had, you know, because it was almost like sometimes Tupac and I would be thinking the same thing, and we would look at each other like, get out of my head, you know. So that was, you know, really, I think, something that I really cherish, you know. But all of us, you know, we were like, you know, a family. You know, you work on this movie for 3 months, and then they say, okay, that's a wrap, it's no more. It's kind of like, are we still gonna see you, you know? So we all still keep in contact, you know.
How about filming in South Central LA? Where are you from?
South Central LA.
Oh, so it didn't...
No, it wasn't a shock to me. It wasn't like... And I mean, there's South Centrals all across the country, and I think it's kind of sad that, you know, basically only thing people want to hear about is LA and New York. So they kind of hype South Central up. The media has made South Central to be this scary place. I go to New York and people are like, I don't know about South Central. And I'm in the Bronx and I'm like, what are you talking about? You know? So no matter where you go, there is a South Central. And I think a lot of other inner city communities kind of feel left out. They kind of feel like, you know, South Central, that's all there is, you know, like we're not here either. And then South Central kind of felt like, I think, well, finally people are recognizing us. And I want South Central and all the other inner city communities to be recognized but not glorified, you know, because there are a lot of positive things going on there, but it seems like they kind of like touch on the negative a little bit more. And there are a lot of positive people, a lot of positive community things that, you know, they have for children, for the elderly, you know. It's not just 40 ounces and guns.
Well, they make it seem so frightening. In the media. And I think what you're saying, you know, so many people, like you said, you know, go into the neighborhoods to cover something, if we're reporters, or for whatever reason we have to go in and go, Oh, you mean, there's just families here? And
Yeah, because it can be frightening. I mean, that side is there, but that's just not the only side. And if you only see this side, I mean, I wouldn't want to, from what I see on TV, I wouldn't want to go to South Central either. You know, I mean, it's like you think you're going to, if you wear red or blue, you're going to get killed, you know. And it's not like that.
Regina, you were shooting when the King verdict came out. You were in Simi Valley, right?
Yeah.
How did that affect the set?
Well, I actually hadn't started shooting yet. That was the first day, and I wasn't actually scheduled to shoot that day. But I don't think it really created too much tension on the set. I think for the movie, you see actual shots where she's driving through and, you know, looking at all the burnt, places, and I think it kind of added to the film. I really do, you know, added to the story. It brought a little bit more compassion to the story because I think even more people will understand and do understand where they come from and what they do have to go through to get out of there or to make it better there.
What do you think this movie's about?
I think it's primarily about relationships and the different kinds of relationships and what makes a relationship work and what makes a relationship fail. You see the relationship between Lucky and Justice, Chicago and Aisha, Justice and Aisha, Chicago and Lucky. You know, there's so many different types of relationships going on there, and I think everyone's going to be able to relate to all of them, if not to one of them, if not all of them. You know, can say, oh, I have a friend like that, or yeah, she so and so is like a mother to me. You know, that's basically what I think it's about. Aside from being a love story, you know, it is a love story.
Do you think the neighborhood is almost another character?
Definitely. Because everyone's environment is, you know, that's what determines them as a person, you know, just the environment that you were in, born and raised in. So yeah, I think it's another character.
One thing I've noticed about John Singleton's movies is he has kind of a Spike Lee flavor about one thing. He'll put something in the movie and never tell you what it's about or what's going on and leave you to think. Mm-hmm. And the one in this movie was when the one guy in the shop got that phone call. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We never really knew what it was, but I was thinking that maybe he just got the phone with his doctor and he was told he was HIV positive or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think that's the reason for it, for you to just, you know, create your own, you know, conclusion. Exactly.
What was your conclusion?
I thought of it as he had a friend that was in the hospital and was probably dying from AIDS and had died or had.
So there was nothing in the script that actually said.
Mm-mm.
Did John ever tell you?
No, I never asked John. I never really did involve myself with that part because when actually doing the movie, I'm like trying to think of Aisha all the time, and you just stay in Aisha mentality while you're actually filming, and Aisha could really care less. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back from Regina King, the Regina King interview. Matt, you have something to say about Regina?
Well, apparently we're never going to know what was said on that phone call. The one that made Haywood so sad. She talked about it, John Singleton talked about it, that there's no answer. So here's my take. It was a prank call. Somebody asked him, hey, is your refrigerator running? Well, then you'd better go catch it. And that seemingly harmless joke sent Haywood spiraling into a moral hellscape of self-doubt. Is my refrigerator running? How do I know that for sure? And if it isn't, who am I to demand that it has to? So now when you watch that scene in the salon again, I think it's going to make a lot more sense. You're welcome.
Wow. That's some value added content to Poetic Justice. You know what? I'll give you a little bit of a confession. I never saw Poetic Justice, so I'm gonna have to see it just for that reference.
I actually hadn't seen it, but I watched it this week to prepare for these shows because
very cool.
You know that's what a professional would do.
Moving on. So
next up we have
Tupac Shakur. By the way, in the 90s, I was a huge fan of Digital Underground.
Okay.
Huge fan of Tupac Shakur. One of the things I only saw sections of Poetic Justice as a youth, I loved that Tupac seemed to me, he was a very natural actor. Is that what you got from watching?
Very charismatic.
Yes. Very, very charismatic. Great hip-hop artist. So he's good in this movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, tragic passing, but I actually loved him in the movies Bullet, gang-related, Above the Rim. He was very, very memorable.
This is his second movie. The first one was Juice.
Of course, Juice.
Yeah, he played the character Bishop. And he talks about Bishop a bit in this interview.
A lot of Bishop stuff in the Poetic Justice interview. What I thought was really interesting regarding the Tupac interview was towards the end of the interview, he has this really impassioned monologue / speech about just paying attention to fellow Americans as opposed to people outside of the U.S. And it's very eloquent and rageful, and I thought I was buying it.
Yes, and very relevant to today, I thought. I mean, this interview was in 1993, and it's kind of amazing that how much hasn't changed and how these words still resonate.
Yeah, the whole idea.
Everything he's saying is like he could have said that yesterday.
Yes, very cool. Anything else regarding Tupac?
Yeah, quite a bit. Right when the movie came out, Tupac had just put out an album strictly for my, I don't know, where do we go with that? I can't say the word. It starts with an N.
Okay.
He was just dropping his single, I Get Around. And since a lot of us had music shows, the first question was about that. So he tells the story behind that song. He is going to talk a little bit about the Digital Underground. Greg, you already brought them up. This was a group that he was in for 4 years before becoming a solo artist. And for most of that time, he actually was working as one of their roadies. But then they featured him on Same Song from the soundtrack to the 1991 film Nothing But Trouble.
Very cool. Demi Moore reference.
Well, that's what it was from.
Yeah.
It was a huge radio single, and he kind of exploded from that. And then shortly afterwards, he left Digital Underground to make his own album. Now, you may have noticed in the last two interviews, and you'll definitely hear it more in this one, that the interviewers in this group are not the usual suspects. They're not the guys that we typically would sit with. My boss, Laura Gross, is there, but I don't recognize anyone else's voice. This is something that would happen sometimes when a big music artist participated in a junket. The studio would invite a bunch of radio DJs from all across the country who regularly play their music. And these guys tended to be good interviewers because, they did talk to stars on their shows, but they weren't used to group interviews, the way that the junkets worked. And so they had no experience following the no noise rule. So they do break it a lot. You're going to hear a lot of, while Tupac is talking, which, as we've mentioned before, you're really not supposed to do. Oh, well, nothing we can do about it now.
Yeah.
And he does swear a couple of times, so, our standard language warning, if you've got kids around, you might want to be aware that that's coming up. Okay, unless you got anything else, Greg.
Here is Tupac Shakur from Poetic Justice.
What's up, man? What's up? How y'all doing? All right.
Tell us what you think. Oh, are you switching?
I'm switching. Hang on.
You're switching tapes. Well, should we introduce ourselves then?
I'm Doc Winter from KFJM in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay, how you doing?
I'm Laura Gross, LEG Productions, Los Angeles.
How you doing?
I'm Rachel Rosen, KFI and Associated Press.
Okay.
KPRS, Kansas City.
How you doing?
Kathy Moser, Voice of America.
Hi.
Nancy Harrison, The Entertainment Radio.
Okay, how you doing? I'm
We
Tupac.
met earlier in June at the Shiznit.
Okay.
Because I manage a rap group when we were out here.
All
Take
right.
9 guys with the wild hair.
Yeah. Okay.
You have a single right now that's warming up the CHR charts. Will you
I
tell us
get
about
around. That's the cut. And the whole thing is just like karma because I wrote it in the trailer doing the movie Poetic Justice. I was writing that song. I had the beating thing and everything, and I was thinking, man, if this could be on the soundtrack, this would be the one. And I put it out for my album, and now it's like it's coming out. It's coming out the same time as the movie. It's starting to move up the charts the same time the movie's about to premiere. I'm like, God, what are you saying? What are you trying to, nudge me a little more, if you will? But that's good.
Tell me what the song's about.
It's about partying, just about the groupie scene. I was like bothered up everybody giving me a lot of attention because of the movie and all the tricks and games I was getting from all the females. And the thing about Michael Tyson that bothered me, that Koopy, just used that opportunity to just stick him. So I wanted to talk about how conniving women could be and how I get around. But just because I'm talking to you doesn't mean I'm caught up. You know what I'm saying? I could be smiling and all of that, but it don't mean I'm caught up in you. I'm just talking. I get around. I do this all the time. You know what I'm saying? This is an everyday thing. So it's like can't be tied down. It's like a, can't be tied down song.
As far as your acting is concerned, I've heard the word natural used so many times with you.
I don't like that.
Is that the real story, or did you have to work hard to develop
No, I
your
like to feel it's natural. I like to think that because I really believe that. If people say that, then I'm totally satisfied. Because I read the script, and this happens with both movies I've done. The script, you can have the script. Let me read it 3 times, and they can have the script. I don't even have a script when we did these movies. I don't even have a script. To this day, Poetic Justice, the script is still in tip-top condition. I probably read through it 3 times because when you get on the set, it's all different. The character's going to speak for itself. And as long as I know what he said, it's just like being him. I know what he said yesterday. I know what he's going to say today, and I just go with it. And John be like, that's it. That's good. We're going to work with that. And they come out natural. And I just noticed that if you just don't treat the words like they're the actor. You're the actor. You're that person. You know what Lucky's gonna say, not this piece of paper. Even the director, even the writer, he didn't even know at that time. He could only imagine what this person might say. But I'm him, and I took that position. Like I would think for Lucky, I feel for Lucky, and I talk for Lucky. And if I felt like he wasn't being represented, I said, even if John wrote it, and John wrote it, but I was saying things that he knew I was right. He had to come. He was like, yeah, you're right. And that's why he's a good director, because he would listen and he would give it to me. Just go, yeah, that's Lucky. He would see Lucky growing,
So how close are you to Lucky, like in terms of character-wise?
He's the other side of him. I'm a Gemini. So Lucky is this person and Bishop is this person. Tupac just goes in between, bouncing back and forth.
So is acting ever going to take the place of your rapping career?
Never. It's just like, it's not even a question. I've been asked that so many times, I'm starting to think, why would people think that? It's like, if you could be a doctor and be a jazz musician, why wouldn't you do it? And they would do it. And that would be seen as being professional, and that would be seen as being ambitious. But because I'm an actor and a rapper, it's seen as being greedy, or it's seen as being, oh, your hands are full. It's only an actor and a rapper. I mean, somebody should be going, are you ready to start doing journalism? You know what I'm saying? It's like, why don't I get any questions like, are you ready for journalism, or are you ready for X-ray? You know what I'm saying? Something, I want to move forward. I want to do things that we were meant to do. I want to do them better than people that came before me did them.
Your character Bishop, you scared me in that movie. And in this character, what I found so amazing was the fact that you didn't scare me this time. And I was like, what did you draw upon from each character?
When I did Bishop, I let my emotions run unchecked. I would think thoughts that I didn't know where they came from, and that's when I knew I was that character. I'd be like, damn, nobody even heard me. You know what I'm saying? That couldn't have been acting. Nobody even heard me. Oh wow! But when I did Poetic Justice, the same thing happened. I became Lucky. I became sensitive. It was the same time the riots was going on. I was like walking around like a jilted lover trying to get at Janet Jackson, because I was like so sensitive to being a father, and I was just so worried about my daughter. And in reality, I didn't have a daughter, so I was constantly worried about a daughter that didn't even exist. Because, and then it was just all these little things, and you really manipulate your emotions to the point whereas by the time I got to the screen, I was Lucky. And I tell people that it's like, I just become them roles. That's why I can't do anything where I don't understand. If I don't understand wrong, I can't do it because I have to be that person.
So how about being Janet Jackson's love interest?
It's all good. It's all good. I have no problems whatsoever. If they want to do a sequel, my number is.
Was Renee ever on the set?
Every day. Every single day. Every time.
Was ever raised?
I don't know. I didn't look at him, but he was there. And if I was kissing her right here, he was right there.
There's a rumor that during one of the love scenes that you accidentally or slipped your tongue in her mouth or tried to.
Yeah, of course. Did. And didn't slip it. And let me tell you something. You cannot make somebody else slip their tongue in your mouth. Let me just tell you that. For the record. Y'all might learn right now with that.
Did she get mad?
How could I make her slip her tongue in my mouth?
Oh, okay.
No, she didn't get mad. She smiled and laughed, and her boyfriend was there. So she said, and I said, okay. Your boyfriend was there. But to me, it's never been my thing to kiss. Anybody didn't want to be kissed. So if my tongue was in her mouth, trust me, her mouth was asking for my tongue.
You the man? You the man?
No, not like that, but when you that close, shit, your tongue just go, come on in. Come in.
Anything about her surprise you?
How soft she was. I don't know what I was thinking, but I just was expecting a cardboard or something. She was real soft and tender and sensitive and stuff. She's like, real sweet.
Joe was talking about her star jeans, and
Big star.
Big star, yeah.
Not just star, James.
Big star. Yeah, Janet ain't no joke.
He was also talking about how she felt them out. Saying he,
And every little cut, I'm telling you, she's beautiful. For real. Like, without the TV, she's beautiful. That's real. But she has a good personality also.
So now we've heard about her butt and her personality.
Really, her butt is not her best quality. Let me just tell y'all. Man, her butt is not her best quality.
So you don't like her butt?
No, it's just gorgeous. But I'm just saying, there's so many other things that she did that, I mean, I could get caught up on before I even,
Get to that part.
Yeah, I mean, man.
If Lucky were a real person, would you want to hang out with him? Would you be friends with him?
He'd probably be my best friend.
Wow.
Probably be the person I would hang out with, just me and him. And I go out with my homies and then me and him and hang out. Because he's real. He's dropped all his pretensions of being in society that we all have. He's just real. He's just a father. You know, at some point, some fathers just drop that. You know, they just become fathers instead of being men. They're just fathers. Now, at this point, they're just fathers. All they want is for a future for their kid. And that's what Lucky's done. He's overdone the father thing. He doesn't even want a life for himself. He doesn't want anything but to be successful enough to take care of his daughter. And I think that that's an admirable quality in anybody, just to be able to take care of your child and give yourself to that. And I think he would have that same loyalty as a friend. And he would have that same nurturing quality about him as a friend.
Did it make you want to have a kid?
Yeah, because I used to, I want to get a little bad madness, and I was like, man, she is so cute, the little girl. The little girl was like, little cutie. But not no more though. I'm quick. I'm over that now. That was just for the first 2 months after the film.
Do you have any fallout from your characters? Like after playing Bishop, did you find
every
people
time.
afraid of you, or people tried to, walk up on you like that?
Yeah, people still do that still now. Gangbangers right now think I'm Bishop. Still to this day think I'm Bishop. And they just talk to me and like they would talk to bitch, like I just jumped off the screen, you know. Man, they like compliment me on the way I murdered somebody in the movie or something, you know, the way you just, I'm like, huh? You guys really don't get the whole third person thing, huh? The whole reality thing, huh? Nah, it's not just as general as that, but a lot of people do. And the weird thing is that it's hard to let go of the character when people do that. It's hard to let go of the characters because they keep dredging them up. And it's like you really have to murder these characters, or at least sedate them. You know, you have to not give them attention for about a couple of weeks so they can go away. Because they'll come, I can't explain it without seeing schizophrenic, but a character becomes part of you, you know? And when I was Bishop, I thought like Bishop. And if I didn't let him go, I would have still been Bishop. You know, I remember after the movie, I was depressed. I had to just, like shake it. You're like kicking it. You're like kicking it like a bad habit. You know, you're kicking your character. And with Lucky, it wasn't as difficult to kick, but he stayed with me longer because he was so nice. You know, I didn't want to kick him. You know, it wasn't so bad. That was cool to have him around, you know, because, everybody's kids, I was always nice, and I had all these godchildren. It was hard to tell these children that was just a movie. I had to keep being lucky to them, you know what I'm saying? I couldn't go, well, I can't take you guys out anymore because the movie's over. You know what I'm saying? It was like, okay, and now you meet another person. They were just meeting Tupac, and Tupac is a thug. So they was just like, oh, my God, ooh, what happened? You know what I'm saying? And that's why I was like, man, that was lucky.
Are you a thug?
A thug, in my definition of a thug, which is I'm great at showing the hate you gave, but I'm not good at like conforming. I think a thug is anybody who won't go along with the flow. You know, they'll say he's a thug. I think that's what they say. Only reason I use that word thug is because I used to read in the papers. Anytime a black person or Chicano person's involved, they're a gangbang or a thug. Even if they're innocent, they're an alleged thug, but you can't take that off of your resume. Once people see it, they see it. So I started making it, and let me make this word famous, this thug thing famous. Let me bring light to it, and that's what it's been so far.
Where are you from?
The gutter.
How did you feel when you heard that someone was trying to blame them murdering somebody on your music?
I felt like I needed to go in the studio again. I did. I felt like I needed to. The music I did directly after that was real reflective. It shows that on my album would keep your head up and things. It's like I wanted to make sure people knew if he did that, it's cool. I mean, not cool, but it's like, I can't say why, but do you guys know what I'm rapping about? I was like, let me just write some song. Let me write this. Let me see if you guys really understand what I'm talking about, because I couldn't believe that it was just so, that everybody else believed that was that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, he killed him because Tupac.
What did you think when you heard the verdict?
I felt sorry for him. another, a young black male behind bars, because I know, he was scared. I can understand him. Nothing. Only thing that separates him from me is fame and fortune.
So you feel if you hadn't had fame and fortune, you might have gone in a direction that...
I mean, I know I've been a victim of police brutality, and I know I can shoot good. I've been to the range, got legal guns. I don't know how I would deal with too much more brutality. I don't know which way it's gonna go, but I don't know how I would personally. I've already been knocked to the ground, beat down, slammed, unconscious by the police for nothing. While I was famous. So at this point, I probably wouldn't be as nice. I wouldn't take it again, I don't think. Now, I could be wrong and could take another ass beating, but I don't think I would. And so me feeling that way, I feel like, man, who knows where it's gonna go? They have guns, and they will use them when pressed. So, what would happen?
Do you think that that's a part of what needs to be expressed in music? Do you think artists have a responsibility to talk about?
Yeah, I think I did a great job at bringing it to the light, because as soon as they started talking about killing police, people started talking about it. And then I noticed as soon as I became that figure, that person, police started treating me nice. Every time I got arrested, the sergeant would come in. You know what I'm saying? It's like that they watch to make sure nothing happened, no brutality, everybody watching me, and they asking for autographs for their wives and everything. Cops are like, it's really a bad thing. And I think that's good, because that's really what America, that's what it's supposed to be about. You revolt to change, and there it is. It's not saying that there's change, but at least we have the dialogue now, to where they know me for the fact that I represent a certain constituent that won't have that.
Are you going to stay with the underground?
For every day of my life until I die. They're the only people that supported me. I'm getting support now because I have a major motion picture. But after this picture is over, the underground stayed with me, treated me famous. When there's no movie out, they treat me famous. They treat me like a star when there's nothing. So that's who my allegiance is. That's where my heart's at.
So then why did you go solo?
Because when I say the underground, I mean the underground as a whole, not just digital underground. I mean totally the underground. Just strictly staying underground. Digital underground, I grew out of that. That's a party. I was a roadie. I started that as a roadie, and I fulfilled my obligations. You know what I'm saying? I was a roadie. I carried their luggage, and I moved all the way up to when I was a lead vocalist. There's nowhere else to go except to take over Digital Underground, which was not my plan ever. So I wanted to show all, good children, you make your parents proud by making your own. So I felt like I did what I was supposed to do. Now there's Tupac and Digital Underground. Now we can go out on tour together. Now my record, they're on my record, you know what I'm saying? And it's on the charts instead of me on their record on the charts. So now I can help. I'm in a position to where I can go, 360.
Tell us about the album. I don't want to say the name, but you can.
Strictly for my niggas. It's not niggers, it's niggas. Never ignorant, getting goals accomplished. You see, I like acronyms. But I just do that because people use words to boundary things, and you could just, by just doing the acronym, okay, now it doesn't mean that anymore. So we can say it, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, Strict for My Niggas is, my album got banned because when the guy said that I made him kill a cop, Interscope got scared, and Time Warner got scared, and they pulled my album because it was talking about violence against crooked police, and it can't have that. I said, okay, well, if I can't talk about violence against crooked police, what can I talk about? He said, everything else, just not that. So I couldn't understand why I could talk about murdering crooked black people and crooked crooks, but not crooked cops. So I couldn't write anything. I had a mental block. So now I just going, they just gave me more money. Just kept going to the studio, did about 1,000 tracks, and those are the ones they picked.
And of the
so this is not my best album, you know what I'm saying? But it's me under pressure.
So this,
because I did an album. The only real song on there that I did without pressure is "Get Around," because it didn't say anything about whatever's going on in social in today's society. So, but it's not a true Tupac album because they held me. They held my tongue. I couldn't say things. People wouldn't let me sample them. They got scared. Everybody panicked. Everybody ran.
They seem to blame rock and roll for years before there was rap. For many, many things, people commit suicide, teenagers commit suicide, it's because of Metallica or, Iron Maiden. And rap for all kinds of violence. I mean, how do you feel about that sort of blame when there seems to have been violence before there was rap and rock?
Exactly, and what I say is, I tell them this every time, it's making the problem worse than they think. It's like they probably think they're being just so prudent that they caught these rappers writing these dirty lyrics, but really they're just driving their own kids to us, one. Number two, making our words that much more lethal, because we feel like this. How can America show us that they tell us that they're the strongest country out here, right? The reason being is because anytime anybody says anything against this country, pow! They wipe them out. Surprise attack, that's what America's famous for. Middle of the night, bomb the children's house. You know what I'm saying? And why wouldn't we not see this and go, damn, wait a minute, fuck the peace shit. You know, excuse me, but we need to really think about being stronger, more like a military. And that's all the youth started doing, was acting more like the United States Army, the United States Marines, the United States National Guard. Anytime there's any kind of discussion, confrontation, or whatever, it's America's troops. Send the troops in. Guns. Send in the peacemakers. Go help them people. They're living wrong. So that's how the youth are doing. They're going, well, everybody else is living wrong. Everybody's living rich, and we're living poor. And either all of us got to be poor or all of us got to be rich. So they're just revolting. You know what I'm saying? It's like we learned that fighting is the way you get attention. That's how we're doing it. But in rapping, it's like we're just using words to bring these pictures to, because we feel like if America can rush out to Serbia or rush out to South Africa or rush to Somalia and feed and help and save, why can't they rush and help the babies and the children and the people right here in this country, the people who are dying here in this country? You know what I'm saying? We're putting in our work and paying dues right here in this country, watching them go all over the globe to help every other people but the minorities that live in this country. And we don't want to fill up the ranks of their army. So by rapping, it's like we're trying to just describe that, explain that, and bring light on that. And by them ignoring us or saying that we're just talking violence, it makes us make it more violent, so they can see us just like Serbia. So they can see it, because if you want, because we watching the news, watching all these people crying, they see the kids dying in Serbia, and they're crying when they see, oh, we deserve to send the troops in. I'm watching the same shit, you know what I'm saying, on the same news stations. Kids crying, kids dying, houses blown up, and nobody's crying for my kids. Nobody's crying for anybody that I'm crying for. And why we got to go all the way over there, and you know, and we speak your language. And we're telling you about this in our language. They're telling you in another language, but you hear them. All the way over there, and you can't hear me right here. That's what make us kick up dust. That's what make the lyrics that much more lethal and that much more stronger. We're trying to bring an urgency to it, because we can't go through another couple years like this. We're not going to make it to 2000. You know what I'm saying? Everybody knows what the downtrodden, the have-nots will do. We are the have-nots. We are the products of that. We did it to Great Britain. Now we're gonna watch somebody do it to us, and it's gonna be it's not gonna be just black people. It's gonna be the whole minority. It's gonna be blacks and Mexicans. It's gonna be poor white people. Everybody's gonna just revolt, and America's gonna be wondering what the hell happened. And all we had to do is spread it around. If we don't have the problems a lot of countries have, we're not asking for us to be in power and you guys switch. We're just asking for, even across the board. And to make right some of these wrongs that you've done. You know what I'm saying? Like when they had the other wars, they paid Koreans for they paid Japanese people for bombing their hometown, you know? So can we get some of that? I mean, you raped, beat, you broke families apart. Look at the welfare system. You know, if the father lives there, you can't get welfare. If the father's not there, you get welfare. Well, can we get some help? You know what I'm saying? Can we get a little help here? It doesn't take a genius. But when Clinton was going around, how can we listen to Clinton? He's not talking to us. Nobody's talking to us. So it makes it like the only people that they listen to are rappers. The only people that the downtrodden listen to is rappers and actors. So that's why I do movies, so my face can be popular, and I do this underground rapping so that my words can get out there, put it together, and you let the capitalists work for the downtrodden have-nots.
Realizing the strength that you have as an actor, the character Lucky, and I mentioned this to John too, is a postal worker, and he feels like if he could get involved with rap at some point, he could better support his daughter. Do you feel as if you're sending a bad message to kids that, you need, rap is what you need to do in order to be successful?
I don't think so, because I think that, not to keep making racial things, but like the way the Koreans just, I think they inspired their whole generation when they just started getting businesses and just started doing it, and that doesn't seem like it would be a big thing. Mm-hmm. But look at it now, look how it's grew. One little small thing, just by you doing that, it grows, and your neighbor sees it, and your cousins, and everybody gets, happy about it, and they all help. And that's the same thing we want to do with rap. Rap is like the 1990s gold rush, because we get millionaires, we get rich. Poverty. I went from being homeless on welfare to getting paid. You feel me? And it's like, that's the gold rush. And so that's what I have to inspire, because we have so many things that we can't do. This is one thing that nobody can deny us from. We got first dibs. So that's the occupation I'm going to give them, the occupation that we created.
In the production notes, you're quoted as saying that these are 4 characters who can exist outside of violence.
Right.
And before you take off, before they grab you out of the room, I want you to speak a little bit to that because, at one point in time in the...
I think that all 4 of them didn't, they all, at a previous encounter, saw violence or were involved in violence and definitely saw that wasn't the route they wanted to go. So you can see by Lucky, even when he did that little fight, it really, really did tear at him, you know what I'm saying? Because that wasn't what he wanted. They wanted lives outside the norm, and that's what the norm is, just Mortal Kombat. I think he saw himself more as a general than a foot soldier, to just be fighting like that. He couldn't risk not being there for his daughter. So that was never what he wanted to do. And Justice, of course, that's the last thing she wanted to do because of everybody she's lost. And Regina, just because of the pain that she's experienced, she didn't want a confrontational type of thing. So I think they were all like running away from the violence. And that's why it was so devastating that the violence kept coming to them. Like at the end of the movie and with the crack dude with the daughter. No, it's like the fight with Joe, and it's like the violence kept coming to their circle when they weren't even violent people. It was like outside sources working on 4 really good people.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, thank you.
Are we done? We're done. That's it.
Tupac was definitely a passionate guy. I'm not a fan of rap music, but I liked him in this film, and he's definitely likable in this interview. It's a shame. Real tragedy. He's no longer with us.
Yeah.
I think he had quite a career ahead of him. I think, certainly in music, because, he's like a superstar in the rap world, but I think he would have been a huge movie star as well. I think
totally.
he had that quality.
He had that it factor. Yeah.
Definitely. So anyways, that is the end of another episode. We hope you guys have enjoyed it. Our next episode is going to be a fun one. Not a lot of superstars in this one and not a big box office bonanza, but a personal favorite of mine. Hopefully of yours too, Greg.
I like a lot of Christopher Guest's work. There's still stuff of his that I have not seen.
Okay.
But Waiting for Guffman, the aforementioned Waiting for Guffman.
Not aforementioned. We hadn't said it yet.
Or the after-mentioned. Okay, I'm kidding. Okay, so but Waiting for Guffman, I'm a huge fan of. Okay, with that being said, you can actually follow us by checking out our Facebook page,
or by stalking us,
or by please do tell us when you stalk us. Tell us what you think of Matt and Greg used to interview movie stars.
Please do.
You can find us on mattandgregpodcast.com, and on Facebook you can find us on facebook.com/Matt and Greg.
That is correct.
That is correct. Please feel free to give us your honest thoughts and criticism, insights on the show.
If you like the show, please tell everybody you know. We need the word of mouth.
Yes, subscribe.
We're not shy about telling you. We need it.
I need it, man. Hey, by the way, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and whatever podcatcher you can get your hands on. Subscribe to us.
And if you prefer, we do have a visual version of the show that's on YouTube. You can share it on Facebook or do whatever you want with it. It's all the same content as the audio version.
Till then, Waiting for Guffman is just right around the corner. Enjoy your movie week, folks, and we will see you next time.
Assuming we can see through these microphones, that is what we will do.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
We now return you to your regularly scheduled lives.